Returning home one day, I was stunned to find my room barren. "What's happening here?" I exclaimed. Behind me, my sister-in-law's voice cut through the silence, filled with a sense of victory. "You, a childless, unproductive woman, are nothing but an obstacle in my path. Leave." Her words dripped with malice as she attempted to usurp my parents' home. The notion was absurd. After all, I was single. "I'll unravel your devious plan," I vowed. My name is Catherine, a 40-year-old office worker navigating life's twists and turns. Though I've encountered potential partners, circumstances led me down the path of singlehood. Despite occasional bouts of loneliness, I've made peace with it. Marriage isn't the be-all and end-all. Besides, there's the responsibility of caring for my parents. With my older brother living afar, I took it upon myself to support our aging mother after our father's passing. Now, it's just the two of us, relishing the tranquility of our days together. Despite my mother's sharp mind, a year ago she suffered a leg injury, leaving her disabled. Now reliant on a cane, car, or wheelchair for mobility, she struggles even within the confines of our home, requiring constant care. Fortunately, being single and able to reside with her, I've been able to meet her needs. Were I married and living elsewhere or far away, the situation would be far more challenging. So I suppose my single status has its advantages. Yet while I've found contentment in my life, there's one who's discontented: my sister-in-law. Much younger than me, she married my older brother, making her, despite her status, my junior. They live distantly but return for holidays like Christmas and summer vacations. Whenever my brother's family visits, my sister-in-law seems to reserve her harshest words for me. This past Christmas was no exception. As they arrived, she wasted no time in whispering in my ear, "Still living off your parents, Catherine." Shocked, I retorted, "I'm not mooching off anyone. Just because I'm single and living at home at 40 doesn't make me a parasite." She scoffed. "Oh, really? Well, I'm raising 3 children. Can you even comprehend the responsibility? What's your point? The state's population is declining, isn't it? Our family is doing its part to reverse that trend. Singles like you are the problem," she sneered. "Do you take pleasure in population decline? Is life even worth it if you're single forever?" Her words stung. They struck a chord deep within me. Despite being single for various reasons, there was once a man I hoped to marry, but there were complications with my health. I'm unable to have children. When he asked me to be in a relationship, he knew this from the start, and I was transparent about it. He reassured me, "I just want to be with you, even if we can't have kids. As long as we're together, I'll be happy." So I agreed to date him, but marriage brought unforeseen complexities. The challenges and conflicts we faced led me to remain single. My sister-in-law's hurtful words left me speechless, yet she had the audacity to exploit me financially. "We have 3 kids, remember? Your Christmas gifts should reflect that. We expect generosity. You should contribute to our kids' kindergarten enrollment celebration, at least $1,000. You're not strapped for cash, auntie, so don't act like it. Don't you want to give our kids a good education? I'll let you help raise them, so pitch in for their extracurricular activities." It's as if she believes using the kids as leverage will justify her demands for more money. I don't mind giving gifts for special occasions, but I fail to comprehend why I have to endure her disapproving sighs as she inspects the cash in the envelope right then and there. Then why am I expected to foot the bill for their extracurricular activities? When I mention it to my mom or brother, they react with disbelief, unable to fathom such audacity from my sister-in-law because they've never witnessed it. That's the thing. Behavior only surfaces when we're alone. She's quite cunning. During the recent New Year's holiday, she wasted no time opening the gifts I gave to my nephew and niece while my brother stepped out briefly to assist my mom. With a disdainful tone, she remarked, "Is this all? Your gift is quite meager. How destitute are you, you tightwad?" It's yet another instance that my mom and brother struggle to believe. I've contemplated recording her behavior, but the potential fallout on family dynamics holds me back. I can't risk damaging relationships. After all, my mom cherishes her 3 grandkids dearly. If my grievances lead to my sister-in-law avoiding visits, it would deprive my mom of precious time with her grandchildren. That would be heartbreaking for her, so I opt to stay silent. If I can simply brush off her hurtful comments, perhaps things will calm down. That's what I believed until circumstances took a sharp turn. One weekday, my sister paid a visit. With my brother at work and me working from home, it was just the 2 of us. My mom was at a senior daycare center, the kids were at daycare, and they were due to visit their maternal grandparents afterward. In this rare moment, my sister-in-law came to see me alone. I was puzzled by her unexpected visit on an unusual day, but she wasted no time getting to the point. "I think we should move in here," she declared. I was taken aback. What could she possibly mean by that? "Move in," I echoed, seeking clarification. "Exactly. Our family has been considering it," she confirmed. "By our family, you mean?" I trailed off, trying to wrap my head around the idea. "My husband, our kids, and me," she clarified. "Here, in this house?" I asked, incredulous. "Yes, because I'm pregnant with our fourth child." I couldn't believe it. With 3 kids already, one in elementary school, another in kindergarten, and the youngest just starting preschool, they were expecting a fourth. It was impressive, but they currently lived near her parents, who likely provided support as they were doing today. So, I couldn't help but wonder, what would be the advantage of moving here? "John's getting transferred here. That's the scoop," she revealed. John, my brother, now I recall him mentioning this. "Seems there's a plan to open a branch office right here in our hometown. Who's eager for a branch office gig?" I asked. "John, apparently," she replied. He had volunteered for the position with enthusiasm. It made me wonder how personnel decisions could be so casually made. "Are you okay with this, sis? Wouldn't it be better to stay closer to Mom and Dad?" she inquired. "Mom and Dad are still working, so I can't lean on them too much. They start to fret if I ask too often, lecturing me with check with your husband first or stop delaying parenthood, assuming parents are the ultimate fallback. Mentioning a fourth child would just add to the stress." "Fair enough, that's your call. I'm not in the loop," I responded. "I could empathize with your parents' viewpoint. My brother mentioned how he takes on household chores after work, cleaning, laundry, and even cooking dinner." My sister-in-law confirmed it. It's true. Despite his work fatigue, my brother has always been considerate and helpful. Maybe that's why he seemed worn out whenever I saw him. "Still, isn't expanding the family a bit daring?" I questioned. "Life is a blessing, a joyous occasion," she countered. "I'm not one to say, stop having kids. But why the move to our place?" My confusion must have been evident. My sister-in-law explained. "Dealing with my parents is a hassle, and our current location is too isolated and inconvenient. Instead of leaving John to fend for himself here, we thought it'd be better for all of us to move in together." "Well, there are plenty of daycare options around here, right? So, Catherine, could you please find a place of your own soon?" My sister-in-law's words left me dumbfounded. What on earth was she suggesting? "I'm about moving in. Let's discuss that with my mom and brother. But why should I be the one to leave? Think about it. We'll soon be a family of 6, right?" I reasoned. "That's true," she conceded. "So won't this house be too cramped?" I continued. "Well, I suppose," she reluctantly agreed. "Then why are you telling me to leave?" I pressed. "I don't understand. Yes, 6 people is a lot, but 8 of us, including my mom and me, can manage living together. Sure, when the kids grow up, sharing individual rooms may become necessary, but worrying about that seems premature." Growing increasingly frustrated by my confusion, my sister-in-law raised her voice. "Look, you're in the way. You're childless and getting older. For our sake, move out, and don't go too far. You'll still need to help with the kids," she demanded. After her tirade, she abruptly left, urging me to vacate the premises soon. "We need to have a family meeting." That evening, I briefed my mom on Susan's remarks and dialed my brother. His response caught me off guard. "I've arranged a separate house for my family," he disclosed. "Sure, I've been traveling a lot for work, and I know it's been hard on Susan. But is she really that unhappy in the countryside?" His confusion was palpable over the phone. There was still something unclear. Despite this, Susan's plan to move in with us was seemingly put on hold, or so I thought. After a long stretch of working from home, I returned to the office one day. My mom was staying overnight at the daycare, worn out from work. When I got back home, I was met with a shock. What? My room? Completely empty. It felt surreal. Where had all my belongings gone? I got rid of them. All of them. Susan's voice startled me from behind. Turning around, there she was. "Susan, what are you doing here?" I exclaimed. "Shh, you'll wake the kids," she hushed me. "What kids?" "You'll wake the kids." "What kids?" I questioned, bewildered. "The 3 kids are here until the beds arrive tomorrow. They're sleeping on the living room couch," Susan explained. Rushing into the living room, I found my nephews and niece fast asleep. "What's happening?" I demanded, still trying to process the situation. Susan, looking amused and somewhat speechless, chuckled. "You wouldn't budge, so I had to resort to drastic measures. I'm not leaving. I've already discussed this with my brother. Do you think you can just do as you please? Do you realize how many people you're inconveniencing?" I retorted. "Who's the one doing as they please here?" "I'm the one inconvenienced." I wanted to snap back, but I held my tongue, mindful of the sleeping children. Susan, however, disregarded my restraint and declared loudly, "Who cares what your mother or brother says? If you move out and our family moves in, they wouldn't object. That's for sure." "What? Where's all my stuff?" I exclaimed, bewildered. "I had a junk removal service take it all away," Susan replied casually. "No way. You got rid of everything, even my photo albums." "This is unbelievable," I protested. "Come on, if you understand, then leave," Susan insisted. "What? Hold on. Let's not argue." I resisted, but she easily overpowered me and ejected me from the house. It was nighttime, and causing a scene wouldn't help. She ignored the doorbell and my calls. With no other option, I spent the night at a budget hotel. The next day, I took a day off from work and hurried home. As I reached for the door, Susan emerged. "Oh, Susan," I exclaimed, trying to reach my brother, but to no avail. "Let's talk anyway. My husband is on a long business trip abroad, and the time difference makes it hard to reach him. You know I was on my way out, so make sure you take care of my kids." With Susan's abrupt departure leaving me stunned, I had no choice but to look after the 3 children. When my mom returned home that evening, I greeted her with a bitter expression. "Mom, isn't this a bit too much? It's certainly excessive to disregard John's input and act so assertively. Leaving the kids behind and going out is unbelievable. If she needed to leave them with someone, her own parents would have been the logical choice." I concurred with my mother. "And what are the actual advantages of living here? Plus, she went out all dressed up. There might be a clue in that," I added, pondering. In agreement with my mother's assessment, I promptly enlisted the services of a private investigator. A month later, I found myself in a hurried search for a 1-bedroom apartment as temporary accommodation. Susan had completely redesigned my room in my parents' house, rendering it unrecognizable. John was livid, admonishing her, "You can't just do whatever you want." But she seemed to argue that moving in would be better than their current residence. She also made comments like, "You're often away for work, right?" I thought it'd be nice for the family to stay together, so I tagged along. Raising children is truly challenging. It's only natural to live close to family and seek their assistance, he reasoned. When he mentioned that my mother required care, Susan retorted, "Catherine does, doesn't she? She's always at home. She must have plenty of free time." "I'm not just sitting around. I'm actually working from home." I defended myself, but Susan remained resolute about not allowing me back into the house. "You can't think you'll get away with this forever. We need to talk," I asserted, lacking support from my brother, prompting a family meeting. "Why the sudden urgency? I'm pregnant. Let's make this quick, okay?" Susan grumbled, though her belly showed no visible signs yet. Disregarding her complaint, the 4 of us, my brother, Mom, Susan, and I, gathered in the living room. "By the way, we've left the kids at a weekend daycare. Susan, first off, please apologize for disposing of my belongings without my consent," I requested. But Susan scoffed at my words. "It's your own fault for not leaving sooner." Without hesitation, she added, "People like you, who can't even have kids, should just live in a rundown apartment." "Yes, it's true I can't have kids, but I was living here for Mom's sake," I countered. "But your mother-in-law would enjoy living with her grandkids more than with you," Susan asserted, glancing at my mom. Mom replied diplomatically, "Living with my grandkids would certainly bring me joy." However, Susan cut her off with a triumphant smirk. "See, it's more meaningful for us to live together than with an unproductive person like you." Ignoring Susan's taunt, Mom continued, "If they were my real grandchildren." "Ha!" Susan was bewildered, not grasping my mom's implication. Suddenly, my brother produced a large envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "The findings of your affair investigation," my brother revealed calmly. "Ha!" Susan looked surprised, staring at my brother, who continued unfazed. "You didn't think we'd find out, did you?" "What are you talking about? I never cheated on you," Susan protested. Really? So these pictures are all fake, then? My brother retorted, spreading several photos on the table. Among them. Wait, no, Susan exclaimed, recognizing herself in compromising situations with another man. I found it odd when you insisted we move away from our parents who were helping with the kids to live here. Sure, the city offers more convenience, but you're not even utilizing childcare services and are relying on Catherine for childcare, aren't you? Well, I need a break too. Why not use childcare services like today? It's a waste of money. Do you think I haven't given you enough money? I'm saving up for our future. You defend it. What's the point when our bank account is empty? John interjected, presenting the bank book, which indeed showed a balance of 0. Hey, why are you brushing this off? It's our family's money. I have every right to check. So where's the savings for our future? Well, it's in a different account, you stammered. Oh, really? Let's see that bank book then. I don't have it with me. Where is it? John pressed further. Well, Susan hesitated, her lies becoming increasingly apparent. Despite the moderate temperature, sweat formed on her forehead. Maybe it's in the attic, she finally mumbled. John slammed his hand on the table. Enough. No more lies. Can you still justify yourself in light of this evidence? He demanded, pointing to a photo. Oh, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, Susan confessed, her composure slipping. You've been having an affair with this man since we got married, haven't you? John accused. The guy confessed to me, Susan protested. What? Why were you talking to him? He has a family too. He only confessed to me under the condition that I wouldn't tell his wife, John exclaimed. What? He betrayed me, Susan exclaimed in disbelief. The one who betrayed us is you. Susan seemed flustered under John's intense glare. Eventually, she regained her composure, the sweat dissipating. Well, I regret the affair. It won't happen again, I promise. But I think it's best not to divorce. It's not good for the kids to be without their mother, and besides, I'm carrying a new life. You wouldn't want to be separated from your own child, would you? Turning to me, Susan continued, you can't expect grandchildren from a childless daughter. And if I take the kids and leave after the divorce, you'll never see your grandkids again. Is that what you want, mother-in-law? She laughed triumphantly at our silence. See? Exactly. Useless old woman, just a nuisance. It's only natural for her to leave. Susan stumped around, visibly agitated. Then, unexpectedly, my mother spoke up calmly. Well, you who are completely unproductive to me should also leave with your child. Huh? Susan's smile faltered as she looked at my mother in confusion. John then handed her a document. What's this? She asked, puzzled. Huh? DNA test results. Negative. Susan exclaimed in disbelief. What is this? She demanded. It's the result of a DNA test between me and the kids. When did you? John began. That's none of your business. Anyway, the results speak for themselves. None of them are mine. And here are the results confirming your affair, meaning they are indeed your kids, John interrupted, handing her the document. What? Huh? My kids aren't mine, Susan gasped. Meaning they're not my mother's grandchildren. They're complete strangers. I added, stunned by the revelation. No, it can't be true. You're lying. You knew about this, didn't you? You orchestrated this. Susan accused, her voice rising in panic. I didn't. That's what the other guy said. John protested. You told him it's sad that our children can't live together as a family, I interjected, shocked by the revelation. Susan looked as though she might faint any moment, her face drained of color. Then my mom delivered the final blow. So, you're a burden because you can't bear my son's children. Please pack up and leave with the kids and hurry. What? Are you going to throw us out onto the street? These young kids, you monster. Susan cried out, attempting to garner sympathy. The real monster is you. Another voice boomed through the room, causing Susan to whirl around, eyes wide with shock. Dad, why are you here? And Mom too. Standing before us were Susan's actual parents. They've agreed to take all the children once I explain the situation, my dad explained. You foolish daughter. Can there be anything more shameful for a parent to hear? Susan's father's stern words caused her face to pale even further as she sobbed. John, Catherine, I apologize deeply for my daughter's foolishness. We will make sure she faces the consequences, Susan's mother added. Consequences? Hold on, I can't afford that. Susan protested. Will you cover for me, Dad? She pleaded. No way. I'll lend you the money, but you're paying me back even if it takes you a lifetime, her father declared sternly. With that, her father whisked Susan, who was on the verge of tears, away without waiting for a response. Her mother, repeatedly bowing deeply in apology, left a lasting impression. Despite being good parents, they had raised such a daughter. Raising kids is tough, huh? I remarked lightheartedly. Later on, my brother John smoothly went through with the divorce. Her parents cleared the alimony and her expenses from the affair in one go. The kids went back to their grandparents' home. They've been there before, so they're adjusting fine without any confusion. They didn't do anything wrong, John, who had always believed they were his biological children, said with a hint of sadness. It's hard to accept that they're suddenly not yours. I hope John's wounds heal one day, I mused. 3 years later, John found a great partner and had a child of his own. But that's another story. As for Susan, she had her 4th child, and when she tested for paternity, it confirmed it wasn't John's. Under strict supervision from her parents, she worked tirelessly, but she continued her affair. Eventually, her infidelity was exposed to her lover's wife, leading to a major confrontation. After the intense altercation, Susan faced more alimony payments, and it appeared she was ejected from her parents' home. Her whereabouts remained a mystery thereafter. As for me, I continued to lead a tranquil life, caring for my mother as always. Remarkably, all the belongings she disposed of were swiftly recovered by contacting the waste disposal company on the same day. On one such serene day, a familiar face greeted me unexpectedly. It had been quite some time. Before me stood the man I had once envisioned marrying. I couldn't forget about you, and I've remained single all this time. Even my parents have relented, albeit for a somewhat selfish reason. With my brother now married and having a child, they've told me I'm free to pursue marriage as I please, he confessed, a gentle smile adorning his face. Caught off guard, he presented me with a ring. It may be belated, but I can't imagine being with anyone else. I want to support you in caring for your mother. So will you marry me? Overwhelmed, tears welled up in my eyes. Without hesitation, I embraced him tightly, his tender smile offering reassurance.
My ruthless mother-in-law demanded I hand over my $150 million company to my husband. I saw through their greed and refused. That's when they bribed my own employees to burn my company to the ground, leaving me with nothing. But they didn't know what I had planned. The very next morning, they woke up to a shocking twist they never saw coming, and their world spiraled out of control. I never thought I'd be sitting here recounting the story of how my world was nearly destroyed. My name is Maya Rivers. I'm 33, a fashion designer, and until a few years ago, I believed I was living the perfect life. I had inherited my father's legacy, a $150 million sustainable clothing empire, and I poured every ounce of my creativity and energy into making it thrive. I loved my work, the fast-paced energy of New York City, and the belief that I was building something meaningful, something my father would be proud of. But then came Daniel Hawthorne. When I first met him, I was swept off my feet. Daniel was everything society told me to look for: charming, handsome, and the heir to an old money family fortune. We met at a charity gala, one of those glitzy events where I always felt slightly out of place despite my success. Daniel had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He said all the right things, made me laugh, and within months, I found myself saying yes to his proposal. Looking back, I should have noticed the small cracks early on, but love has a way of blinding you. His mother, Judith Hawthorne, was another story entirely. From the moment we met, she made it clear that she didn't approve of me. I wasn't what she imagined for her precious son. To her, I was a career-obsessed outsider trying to tarnish the Hawthorne family's impeccable image. I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't marrying her after all. But Judith was persistent, meddling, and unkind in ways that made me doubt myself. After the wedding, things changed. Subtly at first. Daniel started making comments about how I worked too much or how a wife's role should be in the home. I brushed them off as harmless opinions, but they grew sharper, more pointed. Judith would chime in, suggesting I hand over control of my father's company to Daniel. He's more experienced with money, dear, she'd say with a patronizing smile. The idea of giving up my life's work felt unthinkable, but I didn't want to cause waves in my marriage, so I avoided confrontation. I wish I had spoken up earlier because things escalated quickly. One evening, during a particularly tense dinner, Judith laid it all out. "Maya, it's time to make a choice," she said. "You're part of the Hawthorne family now. That means leaving behind childish dreams of running a business. Daniel can take care of everything." I froze. Childish dreams? I repeated. "This company is my father's legacy. It's my legacy." Her expression hardened. "Your duty is to this family, not to some vanity project." Daniel stayed silent, staring at his plate, and in that moment, something in me cracked. "I won't do it," I said firmly. "I'm not giving up my company, and I'm not giving up who I am." Judith's eyes narrowed, and she exchanged a look with Daniel. "We'll see about that," she said coldly. At the time, I thought it was an empty threat, but things only grew worse from there. Daniel became distant, his temper flaring at the smallest things. He criticized my every move, from how I managed my team to how I spent my time. Judith started showing up unannounced, hovering over me like a vulture. I could feel them both working to wear me down, but I refused to yield. The breaking point came one night when I got a call at 2 a.m. My assistant was frantic. "Maya, the factory, it's on fire." I remember rushing out of bed, my heart pounding, as Daniel lazily asked where I was going. "The factory's on fire," I said, already grabbing my coat. His response chilled me. "Oh, that's a shame." The scene at the factory was chaos. Flames roared, smoke filled the air, and firefighters struggled to control the blaze. Half the property was gone by the time the fire was extinguished. I stood there, watching everything my father and I had built reduced to ashes. I felt numb, but deep down, something didn't sit right. Accidents happened, sure, but this felt deliberate. The next morning, the reports rolled in. Faulty wiring, they said. A tragic coincidence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was something more. As I sifted through the rubble, Daniel and Judith barely seemed concerned. Judith even suggested I sell the remaining assets. "Cut your losses," she said casually. "Maybe it's a sign that you're meant to focus on more important things." Her words stung. My instinct screamed that something was off, but I didn't know where to start. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator, Liam Carter. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I got them. Little did I know, what Liam would uncover would shatter whatever remnants of trust one had left. But at that moment, standing amidst the ruins, I could only feel one thing: determination. They wanted to break me, to take everything I had. But they underestimated me, and that was their biggest mistake. The days after the fire felt like a haze. I barely slept, replaying every moment in my head. I kept thinking about the timing, the details, and most of all, Judith's unnervingly calm reaction. Something about her demeanor wasn't just cold, it was calculated. Daniel, on the other hand, acted as if the fire was an inconvenience rather than a catastrophe. He made no effort to comfort me, or even pretend he cared. His apathy stung more than anything else. I threw myself into rebuilding what I could, salvaging my remaining assets and reassuring my employees. But even as I worked, my gut told me there was more to this fire than met the eye. That's when I reached out to Liam Carter, a private investigator I'd been recommended by a friend. Liam was in his early 40s, sharp-eyed, and exuded quiet confidence. He listened carefully as I told him about the fire, my suspicions, and the growing tension with Daniel and Judith. "You think this wasn't an accident," he said, more of a statement than a question. "I know it wasn't," I replied firmly. "I just need proof." Liam nodded. "All right. I'll start with the basics. CCTV footage, employee interviews, and a closer look at the financials of your business. If there's something to uncover, I'll find it." For the next few weeks, I kept myself busy, but the wait for Liam's findings was agonizing. Daniel grew more distant, spending nights away from home without explanation. When I confronted him, he dismissed me with a wave of his hand. "I've got business to handle," he said, his tone dripping with annoyance. "Maybe you should focus on figuring out what to do with your situation." My situation. That's what he called the fire that had nearly destroyed my life's work. It was becoming clearer with each passing day that Daniel was no longer the man I thought I'd married, or maybe he never had been. I started paying closer attention to his behavior. He took more calls in private, had hushed conversations with Judith, and whenever I entered the room, they'd both fall silent. It wasn't paranoia anymore. Something was going on. Liam's first update came 2 weeks later, and what he shared left me reeling. "I've reviewed the CCTV footage from the night of the fire," he began, sliding a laptop across the table toward me. "Watch this." The grainy video showed 2 of my employees entering the factory hours before the fire started. I recognized them immediately. Mark and Elena, both longtime staff members I had trusted implicitly. The footage showed them fiddling with machinery and sprinkling what looked like liquid from a canister across the floor. "Arson," Liam confirmed. "The fire wasn't caused by faulty wiring, Maya. It was deliberate." I felt sick to my stomach. "But why? Why would they do this?" Liam's expression darkened. "That's where things get interesting." I spoke to Mark and Elena separately. At first, they denied everything, but when I showed them the footage, they cracked. They admitted they were paid to start the fire. "Paid? By who?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He hesitated before answering, as if weighing how much to say. "Judith and Daniel." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. "You're sure?" They were careful, but not careful enough. Bank records show large, unexplained transfers from an account linked to Daniel. Mark and Elena received those payments just days before the fire. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process the betrayal. Judith and Daniel, my husband and his mother, had conspired to destroy my business. I felt anger rising in me, hot and blinding. They had taken everything I loved, everything I'd worked for, and burned it to the ground. For what? Power? Control? I couldn't fathom how they could be so cruel. "What do I do now?" I asked Liam, my voice shaking. "We build a case," he said simply. "You've got enough here to go to the authorities, but if you want this to stick, we'll need more emails, phone records, anything that ties them directly to the arson." Over the next few weeks, Liam continued to dig, and the evidence he uncovered painted a damning picture. There were emails between Judith and Daniel discussing their plan in coded language, phone records showing late-night calls to Mark and Elena, and even a paper trail of bribes paid to other employees to keep quiet about what they knew. Despite the mounting evidence, I didn't confront Daniel or Judith. Not yet. Instead, I played the part of the oblivious wife, biding my time while Liam and my attorney, Sandra Torres, prepared a legal case. Sandra was a no-nonsense powerhouse of a woman, known for her expertise in high-profile cases. When I showed her the evidence, she didn't mince words. "This is airtight," she said. "They won't get away with it." But pretending everything was normal was the hardest part. Every time I sat across from Daniel at dinner or endured one of Judith's smug remarks, I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them I knew, that their plan had failed, that I would see them brought to justice. But I couldn't risk tipping them off. Not yet. Instead, I focused on rebuilding what I could, even as the weight of their betrayal threatened to crush me. My father's voice echoed in my mind during those dark days. "Maya, no matter what happens, never let anyone take away your integrity or your strength." I clung to those words like a lifeline. They had tried to destroy me, but they didn't know me. I wasn't the weak, obedient woman Judith wanted me to be, and I wasn't going to let them win. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, they would realize just how much they had underestimated me. Sitting across from Daniel every night, pretending nothing had changed, was an exercise in restraint. I could feel the weight of the lies between us, and it took everything in me to keep playing the role of the clueless wife. But deep down, I knew I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the woman who had once trusted him, who had believed in his charm and easy smile. Now, I was biding my time, gathering strength, and preparing for the moment I'd bring him and Judith down. The evidence Liam uncovered was damning. There were incriminating bank records, conversations between Judith and Daniel discussing how to handle the Maya problem, and even witness testimony from employees who had been bribed to keep quiet. Sandra, my lawyer, assured me that we had enough to take them to court. But I wasn't ready yet. Not until I had everything lined up perfectly. I wanted to make sure there was no way they could wriggle out of this. Then one evening, something happened that nearly broke my composure. I came home to find Judith sitting in my living room, sipping tea, like she owned the place. Daniel was nowhere to be seen, but her presence was enough to set my nerves on edge. "Maya," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I thought it was time we had a little chat. Woman to woman. I forced myself to stay calm. "About what?" "Oh, you know," she said, setting her teacup down with a deliberate clink. "Life. Choices. The future." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You've been through so much lately. The fire, the stress of rebuilding. It's all very unfortunate." My fists clenched at my sides, but I kept my voice even. "It is. But I'll manage." "Of course you will," she said smoothly. "You've always been so determined. But sometimes, determination isn't enough. Sometimes, you have to know when to let go. Don't you think it's time to consider selling what's left of your company? It's a burden, Maya. And Daniel can help you start fresh." I stared at her, the mask finally slipping. Her words were laced with veiled threats, but I could see the greed in her eyes. She wasn't even pretending to hide it anymore. They wanted me to give up everything, my company, my legacy, my identity, so they could claim it for themselves. "Thank you for your concern, Judith," I said, my voice cold. "But I'm not giving up. Not now, not ever." Her smile faltered for a moment, and I saw a flicker of something, anger, maybe even fear. "Well," she said, standing and smoothing her skirt, "I hope you know what you're doing. For your sake." She left without another word, and as the door closed behind her, I felt a surge of determination. They were getting desperate. They knew I wasn't going to back down, and it was only a matter of time before they made their next move. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. A week later, Liam came to me with the final piece of the puzzle, a recording of a conversation between Judith and Daniel, discussing the fire in detail. They talked about paying off the employees, staging the scene to look like an accident, and even their plans to force me into selling the company afterward. It was all there, clear as day. "It's over," Liam said, handing me the file. "This is the nail in the coffin." I nodded, my heart pounding. "It's time." Sandra wasted no time filing the lawsuit. The charges were serious. Arson, conspiracy, fraud. The media caught wind of the story almost immediately, and within days, it was all anyone could talk about. Headlines screamed about the fashion empire scandal, and photos of Judith and Daniel were plastered across every news outlet. They denied everything, of course, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the summons arrived, Daniel finally confronted me. I was in the kitchen, going over some documents, when he stormed in, his face red with anger. "What the hell is this, Maya?" he demanded, waving the papers in my face. "You're suing me? Your own husband?" I stood my ground, meeting his glare with unwavering resolve. "You're not my husband, Daniel. Not anymore. A husband doesn't destroy his wife's life for money. A husband doesn't conspire with his mother to burn down everything she's worked for." His face twisted with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice icy. "I have the proof, Daniel. The emails, the phone calls, the money transfers. I know everything." For a moment, he looked stunned, like he hadn't expected me to fight back. Then, his expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Maya. You're going to regret this." "No," I said, my voice steady. "The only mistake I made was trusting you." He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, and I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The fight was far from over, but I was no longer afraid. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. As the court date approached, the media frenzy intensified. Journalists camped outside my house, and every detail of the case was dissected on talk shows and social media. It was exhausting, but I stayed focused. I had a team of brilliant lawyers, rock-solid evidence, and a fire inside me that refused to be extinguished. The night before the trial, I sat alone in my office, looking at a photo of my father. "I'll make this right, Dad," I whispered. "I'll protect what you built." The next morning, I walked into the courtroom with my head held high, ready to face whatever came next. The courtroom was packed that day. I remember walking in, feeling the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on me. The media had dubbed the trial the Hawthorne betrayal, and everyone was eager to see how it would unfold. But I wasn't here for the cameras or the spectacle. I was here to reclaim my life, my father's legacy, and my dignity. Daniel and Judith sat at the defense table, their expressions carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in their body language. For once, they weren't in control. Judith occasionally whispered to Daniel, her sharp features betraying flickers of worry. Daniel avoided looking at me altogether. It didn't matter. They couldn't intimidate me anymore. Sandra Torres, my lawyer, was a force to be reckoned with. She began the case with a clear, powerful statement. This is a story of betrayal, greed, and the deliberate destruction of a woman's life's work. We have evidence that proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Judith and Daniel Hawthorne conspired to destroy Maya River's business for their own gain. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically. CCTV footage of my employees setting the fire, bank records showing the bribes paid from Daniel's account, emails between Judith and Daniel discussing the arson, and the damning audio recording where they detailed their plan in their own voices. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together for the jury, and the picture it painted was undeniable. I sat silently, listening to every word, reliving every painful moment. When Mark and Elena, the employees who had set the fire, took the stand to testify, it was difficult to keep my emotions in check. They admitted to their roles, explaining how Judith and Daniel had pressured and paid them to commit the crime. Their guilt was palpable, and while I felt a measure of anger toward them, I couldn't help but pity them as well. They'd been pawns in a much larger game. The defense tried to discredit me, of course. They painted me as a cold, career-obsessed woman who had neglected her husband and antagonized his family. Judith's lawyer even suggested that I was fabricating the accusations out of spite. But Sandra dismantled their arguments with precision and grace. Every piece of evidence was airtight, every witness credible. The more they tried to shift blame, the more desperate they seemed. When it was my turn to testify, I felt a mixture of fear and resolve. I took a deep breath and faced the jury. My father built this company with his blood, sweat, and tears. I began, my voice steady despite the emotion threatening to choke me. When he passed, I vowed to carry on his legacy, to honor his hard work and vision. I trusted Daniel and his family. I believed they wanted what was best for me, for us. But they didn't. They saw my success as a threat, something to control and, if necessary, destroys. I looked directly at Judith and Daniel, who finally met my gaze. They thought they could break me, but they underestimated me. The court was silent as I finished my testimony. I felt a strange sense of catharsis, as if a weight I'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. No matter what happened, I knew I'd done everything I could to fight for what was right. The jury deliberated for hours, though it felt like days. When they finally returned, the air in the courtroom was electric with anticipation. My heart raced as the foreman stood to deliver the verdict. On the charges of arson, conspiracy, and fraud, we find the defendants guilty. The room erupted in whispers and gasps, but I barely heard them. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave, and for the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. Judith and Daniel sat frozen, their faces pale. The judge sentenced them to lengthy prison terms, and while I knew it wouldn't undo the damage they had caused, it felt like justice. The employees involved in the arson also faced legal consequences, though their sentences were less severe. The court acknowledged that they had been manipulated, but their actions couldn't go unpunished. As for me, the court awarded me full ownership of the Hawthorne family's properties as restitution for the financial and emotional devastation they had caused. It was a symbolic victory as much as a practical one, a way to ensure that the Hawthornes' ill-gotten power would no longer overshadow me. Rebuilding my company wasn't easy. The financial loss was immense, and the emotional scars ran deep. But with the support of my remaining employees, loyal clients, and newfound allies, I poured my heart into restoring what had been lost. And in time, we not only recovered but thrived. The fire had been meant to destroy me, but it had forged something stronger instead. In the years that followed, my story became a beacon of hope for others facing betrayal and hardship. People would write to me, telling me how my fight for justice inspired them to stand up for themselves. It was humbling, and it reminded me why I'd fought so hard in the first place. Looking back, I see now that the fire wasn't just the end of one chapter, it was the beginning of another. Judith and Daniel tried to strip me of everything, but they couldn't take away my resilience, my determination, or my integrity. And in the end, those were the things that mattered most. My father used to say, "Maya, true strength is not about avoiding the flames. It's about rising from the ashes." I understand that now more than ever. This is my story. It's not just about betrayal or revenge. It's about finding the courage to rebuild, to fight for what's right, and to never let anyone take away your power. It's about resilience. And I hope it's a reminder that no matter how dark things get, there's always a way to rise. My mother-in-law shattered my happiness, turning my life into a gilded cage. She crushed my career, treated me like a servant, while my husband stood silent. Suffocated, I chose revenge. I switched her medication and walked away. An hour later, my husband called, panic in his voice. I listened, unmoved, then laughed at his helplessness. The game had just begun. They say marriage is a partnership, a bond built on love, trust, and devotion. But in my case, it was a trap. A beautifully decorated prison wrapped in luxury, yet suffocating in every way possible. My name is Olivia Carter, and this is the story of how I lost everything, only to reclaim it all in ways no one ever expected. I met Daniel Carter when I was 26. I was a schoolteacher in Los Angeles, working hard to build a life of my own. He was everything I thought I wanted: handsome, charming, wealthy. He made me feel special, chosen. At first, it was a dream. The extravagant dates, the whispered promises of forever. When he proposed, I didn't hesitate. I should have. I didn't know then what I was truly marrying into. Daniel's family was old money, built on generational wealth and a ruthless business empire. But the real power wasn't in Daniel, it was in his mother, Patricia Carter. From the moment I stepped into the Carter estate, I knew I was an outsider. Patricia made sure of that. "You're not what I expected," she said to me the first time we met, her sharp eyes scanning me like I was some unwanted object. "I love your son," I had replied, forcing a polite smile. "Love," she scoffed, sipping her wine. "Love doesn't keep a family like ours together. Power does." I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. I wanted to be a good wife, to fit into their world. I gave up my teaching job, at Daniel's insistence, because a Carter wife shouldn't have to work. I was naive. I thought it was about taking care of me. But in reality, it was about control. Patricia ruled the house with an iron grip. Nothing happened without her approval. She monitored my every move, criticized my every decision. "You should wear your hair differently, something more elegant. That dress looks cheap, Olivia. A Carter woman should look like money. Your place is to support Daniel, not to have ambitions of your own." I tried to win her approval, but nothing was ever enough. And Daniel? He did nothing. At first, I thought he just didn't notice. But then I realized he didn't care. He had grown up under Patricia's rule, conditioned to obey her. If she belittled me, he ignored it. If she controlled me, he let her. And then there was the gambling. Daniel was the golden boy in public, a successful businessman, the perfect son. But behind closed doors, he had a dark side. He gambled. A lot. At first, I didn't think much of it. A few nights at the casino, some high-stakes poker games. But then I noticed the money disappearing. The late-night phone calls. The frustration when he lost. "It's just a game, Olivia," he told me once, brushing off my concerns. "You worry too much." But I knew better. Then came the women. I wasn't stupid. I saw the signs, the lipstick stains, the perfume on his clothes, the text messages he tried to hide. Every time I tried to confront him, he brushed me off. You're overreacting. Don't act like some jealous wife, Olivia. If you were more exciting, maybe I wouldn't need to go out so much. I should have left then. I should have run. But where would I go? I had no job, no money of my own. They made sure of that. Patricia had convinced Daniel that I didn't need an income, that a real Carter wife relied on her husband. And so, I stayed. Then, everything changed. Patricia started getting sick. It wasn't sudden, but I noticed before anyone else. She was losing weight, moving slower, clutching her chest when she thought no one was looking. The doctors confirmed it, a heart condition. At first, I felt sorry for her. She was cruel, but she was still human. I tried to take care of her, thinking maybe, just maybe, this would bring us closer. But Patricia remained the same bitter woman. Don't pretend you care, Olivia, she snapped. You're just waiting for me to die. She wasn't wrong. I didn't want to be this person, but after years of being treated like nothing, something inside me snapped. For the first time, she needed me, and I wasn't going to waste the opportunity. It started with the medication. I was the one who gave Patricia her pills every day, and so I adjusted the doses. Not enough to kill her, just enough to make her weaker. She became more dependent on me, more fragile, more powerless. And while she was slipping away, Daniel was self-destructing. His gambling debts were piling up. His business was starting to crumble. And his so-called best friend, James Walker, was feeding his addiction, pushing him into riskier deals. I listened to their heated phone calls. I watched as Daniel became desperate. And I realized I didn't need to destroy him. He was doing that all on his own. I played the part perfectly. I was the caring wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law. I pretended I didn't know about the financial disaster, about the affairs, about the lies. I waited, because soon everything would fall apart. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left with nothing. Daniel's downfall began long before he realized it. At first, the cracks were small, missed payments, bad investments, quiet whispers in the business world that the once mighty Carter empire was weakening. But like any man too arrogant to admit his mistakes, he ignored the warning signs. He still believed he was untouchable, still thought his last name carried enough weight to protect him from the mess he had created. I watched it all unfold, playing my role carefully, ensuring that he never suspected how much I truly knew. Every night, he came home later, his face drawn with stress, his patience thinner. He started drinking more. When I asked him what was wrong, he brushed me off, muttering vague excuses about business issues and temporary setbacks. But I had already gone through the paperwork in his office. The debts were real, the losses were staggering, and the vultures were already circling. Patricia, oblivious to what was happening, continued to believe her son could do no wrong. Even as her health declined, she remained sharp enough to criticize me. Her words weren't as biting as before. She didn't have the energy for that. But the disdain was still there, thinly veiled beneath her weakening voice. She depended on me now, relied on me for even the simplest things, but that didn't mean she respected me. You think you've won, don't you? She muttered one afternoon as I adjusted the pillows behind her back. I looked at her, feigning innocence. Won what, Patricia? She exhaled sharply, as if I had disappointed her yet again. This house. Daniel. You think if I'm gone, everything will fall into place for you? I smiled softly, tilting my head. You should rest, Patricia. Stress isn't good for your heart. She glared at me, but there was something else in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe even fear. For the first time, I think she understood what I had known for years. She was no longer the powerful matriarch she once was. She was at my mercy now, and there was nothing she could do about it. As Patricia grew weaker, Daniel grew more desperate. I could hear the tension in his voice every time he spoke to James Walker, his business partner, the man who had led him down this reckless path. James had never cared about Daniel's success, only about what he could gain from him. And now, when Daniel needed his help the most, James was conveniently unavailable. One evening, after another failed deal, Daniel lost his temper. He came home late, his tie undone, his face flushed with anger and alcohol. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to read, when he stormed in and threw his briefcase against the wall. Papers scattered across the floor, a visible mess of unpaid bills and foreclosure notices. "We're ruined, Olivia," he muttered, collapsing onto the couch beside me. I turned to him slowly, making sure my face showed just the right amount of concern. "What do you mean?" He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. "James screwed me over. The deal I was counting on, it's gone. Everything is falling apart." I placed my hand over his, squeezing gently. "Daniel, we'll figure something out," he scoffed, pulling away. "There's nothing to figure out. The banks are breathing down my neck. We're drowning in debt. And my mother," he trailed off, his face clouded with something between frustration and despair. "What about hers?" I asked softly. He let out a bitter laugh. "She's not in any shape to help. And even if she were, she'd probably rather die than admit I've failed." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to tell him the truth, that Patricia had already handed over control of her finances to me, trusting that I would protect them better than he ever could.
He didn't need to know that yet.
Not yet. That night, after Daniel passed out in a drunken haze, I stood by our bedroom window, staring out at the city lights. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. Everything was collapsing around him, and all I had to do was wait a little longer. A few nights later, Patricia collapsed. I was in the kitchen when I heard the thud upstairs. At first, I didn't move. I let a few seconds pass, letting the silence stretch. Then, slowly, I made my way to her room. She was on the floor, clutching her chest, her face twisted in pain. Her breathing was labored, her fingers weakly grasping at the sheets as if trying to pull herself up. Her eyes found mine, wide and desperate. "Help me," she gasped. I stood there for a moment, watching her struggle. It would be so easy to walk away, to let nature take its course. But no, I needed to play this right. I knelt beside her, brushing a strand of silver hair from her damp forehead. "You always told me I didn't belong here," I murmured. "That I was lucky to be a Carter." Her grip on my wrist tightened for a moment, but it was weak. "But Patricia," I continued, lowering my voice, "it's you who doesn't belong anymore." Her breath hitched, her eyes searching mine, but there was nothing she could do. I reached for the phone, dialing 911 with steady fingers. "My mother-in-law," I said, making sure my voice shook just enough to sound believable. "I think she's having a heart attack." By the time the paramedics arrived, Patricia was gone. Daniel was devastated, but not in the way a grieving son should be. He didn't cry at the funeral. He didn't say much at all. Because Patricia's death wasn't just the loss of a mother, it was the loss of his last safety net. The day after the funeral, he sat in his office for hours, staring at the wall, saying nothing. When I brought him coffee, he finally spoke. "We're going to lose the house." I set the cup down on his desk carefully. "But what about your companies?" He let out a humorless laugh. "It's already gone." I didn't pretend to be shocked. I just placed a hand on his shoulder and squeezed. "I'm sorry, Daniel," he sighed, rubbing his face. "I don't know what to do." And for the first time, I realized something. Daniel had never truly been powerful. He had never been in control. He had always been a coward, hiding behind his mother, his money, his last name.
But all of that was gone now.
And he had no idea that the final blow was still coming. Daniel had always been proud, the kind of man who believed he was invincible, untouchable. But now, sitting in his office, hunched over his desk, he looked nothing like the man I had married. His suit, once perfectly tailored and pristine, was wrinkled. His tie was loosened, and his eyes, bloodshot and weary, stared blankly at the wall. He hadn't shaved in days, hadn't eaten much either. I could see the weight of his failures crushing him, and for the first time, I saw him exactly for what he was, a man who had lost everything. I should have felt pity, but I didn't. The house was slipping away, the banks preparing to seize it. His company, once a powerful name in the business world, had crumbled beneath his reckless hands. His so-called friends had disappeared, James Walker being the first to cut ties when the money ran out. The gambling debts had piled too high, and now there was no one left to bail him out. Even Patricia, The one person who had always cleaned up his messes was gone. And I had made sure of that. He looked up at me finally, his jaw tightening. "We need to figure something out," he said, his voice hoarse. "There has to be a way to fix this." I tilted my head, pretending to think. "The money's gone, Daniel. The company is bankrupt. The house is about to be foreclosed. What else is left to fix?" His hands curled into fists.
You don't understand.
"We can rebuild. We can sell some things, get investors." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to sell, Daniel. No one is coming to save you." He exhaled sharply, standing up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Then help me, Olivia. You have money. My mother left you everything." I took a slow breath, waiting for this moment. "No, Daniel. She left it in my name. It's not yours." His eyes darkened, his nostrils flaring. "That's my family's money." I took a step forward, meeting his gaze without fear. "And you spent every penny of what was yours. Patricia didn't trust you to handle the rest, and for good reason." His expression shifted, disbelief washing over his face. "You planned this, didn't you?" His voice was low, accusing. I smiled just a little. "Not at first. But once I realized what you were, I adapted." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, laughing bitterly. "You think you've won?" I shrugged. "No, Daniel. I think I've survived." He lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my wrist tightly. "You're not going to just walk away from this." I didn't flinch. "I already have." His grip loosened, and I stepped back, adjusting the sleeve of my blouse. "The divorce papers are in the living room. I suggest you sign them." His laugh was bitter, filled with disbelief. "You're divorcing me now?" I sighed, as if I were explaining something simple to a child. "Daniel, there's nothing left. The business is gone. The house is gone. You have nothing to offer me. So tell me, why would I stay?" He was silent, his jaw clenched, his hands shaking at his sides. I let the moment stretch, then turned on my heel, walking toward the door. Before stepping out, I paused. "I'll be leaving tomorrow. I suggest you figure out where you're going to stay." And then I walked away. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of Daniel pacing downstairs. He was unraveling, his entire world falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He had built his life on lies, on arrogance, on the belief that his name alone would always be enough. But he had never been strong. He had never been smart. And now, he was just a broken man with nowhere left to turn. I should have felt satisfied, but I didn't. Not yet. The next morning, I woke to the sound of movement downstairs. When I entered the living room, Daniel was standing there, the divorce papers spread out on the coffee table. He had a pen in his hand, but he wasn't signing. He was just staring at them, his face unreadable. I walked past him, pouring myself a cup of coffee, waiting. Finally, after a long silence, he spoke. "What happens to me now?" I glanced over my shoulder. "That's not my problem." His jaw clenched. "You really don't care, do you?" I took a sip of my coffee. "You never cared when I needed you. Why should I care now?" His hands tightened into fists, but he didn't argue. He knew the truth just as well as I did. Without another word, he picked up the pen and signed the papers. The moment he did, I felt something shift inside me. It was over. I left the house an hour later, the same house that had once felt like a prison. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Daniel was a man who had spent his whole life looking down on me, believing he would always be the one in control. But now, the tables had turned, and he had no one to blame but himself. As I drove away, I allowed myself a small smile. Daniel Carter was finally nothing, and I was finally free. I left without looking back. The Carter estate, once a symbol of wealth and power, now stood as nothing more than a hollow structure, stripped of its grandeur, abandoned by the people who once held it so high. Daniel was still inside when I walked out, but I didn't care to see his reaction. Whatever he felt, anger, regret, disbelief, none of it mattered anymore. He had spent years pretending I was invisible, treating me like a possession instead of a person. Now, I had done the same to him.
He was nothing to me.
Just a man I used to know. I rented a small apartment by the ocean, a place that wasn't extravagant but gave me something more valuable than gold: peace. For the first time in years, I could wake up without feeling trapped, without hearing Patricia's sharp words or wondering if Daniel would come home reeking of another woman's perfume. The silence was comforting. I didn't need the lavish lifestyle, the designer clothes, the expensive jewelry. I had money now more than I would ever need, but it wasn't about the wealth. It was about knowing that every single thing in my life was mine. I spent my days slowly rebuilding what I had lost. I returned to teaching, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Standing in a classroom again reminded me of the person I used to be before I lost myself in Daniel's world. I had been happy once, content with simple things, and I was determined to find that again. My new life wasn't about revenge anymore. That chapter was already closed. It was about reclaiming the years that had been stolen from me. Then one afternoon my phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. I debated ignoring it, letting it go unanswered, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed accept. Olivia. Daniel's voice was quieter than I remembered, drained of its usual confidence. I didn't respond right away. I waited, letting the silence stretch, forcing him to be the one to fill it. I just wanted to talk, he finally said. I took a slow breath. About what? Another pause. I could almost hear him struggling to find the words. You really don't care, do you? No, I said simply. He exhaled a hollow sound. I lost everything. I closed my eyes briefly, not out of sympathy, but out of exhaustion. I had nothing left to give him, no comfort, no concern. He had made his choices. He had lived recklessly, selfishly, and now he was finally seeing the consequences. I don't know where to go, he admitted. It was strange hearing him like this. Daniel had always been proud, arrogant even. The idea of him being lost, uncertain, would have seemed impossible before. But now, he was just a man without money, without power, without the safety net of his mother's influence. A man who had burned every bridge until there was nowhere left to turn. That's not my problem, I said, my voice calm, detached. There was a long silence, and then, barely above a whisper, he said, You really won. I didn't answer because it wasn't about winning. Winning meant that there was a game to be played, that I had fought for some grand victory. But this wasn't a game. This was survival. I had been left with nothing, pushed to the point where I had no choice but to fight for myself. And now I wasn't standing on top of some empire. I was just free. Goodbye, Daniel, I said, and then I ended the call. I didn't think about him again after that. He was a part of my past, a chapter one had no interest in rereading. I traveled after that, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the chance. Italy, France, Greece. I explored each place at my own pace, no longer answering to anyone, no longer waiting for permission to live my life. Every step I took, every new experience, reminded me that I had been waiting for so long. Waiting for Daniel to change. Waiting for Patricia to accept me. Waiting for someone to rescue me. But in the end, I had saved myself. One evening, as I sat at a cafe in Paris, watching the sun set over the Seine, I felt something that had once seemed impossible. I felt light. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of the past. I wasn't bound by bitterness or anger. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next fight, the next insult, the next betrayal. I was free. And for the first time in my life, I belonged to myself. My cruel husband and mother-in-law tried to force me to transfer my $50 million company to them. When I refused and destroyed their plan, they secretly tampered with my car brakes, causing an accident. I was badly injured and unconscious. When I opened my eyes in the hospital, I could never have imagined that an even bigger storm awaited me. I used to believe in fairy tales. That's how my story starts, a young woman, brimming with dreams, who thought she had found her Prince Charming. My name is Eleanor Monroe, and I built a $50 million leather fashion company, Eleanor Luxe, from the ground up. It was my passion project, my lifeline, and the product of years of hard work and sleepless nights. Little did I know, the man I married and his family would do everything in their power to rip it away from me. It all began 3 years ago in Los Angeles, California. I met Derek Harper at a charity gala hosted by a mutual friend. He was charming, with a smile that could disarm anyone. A 34-year-old real estate agent, Derek carried himself with confidence and seemed genuinely interested in my work. At the time, I thought I had found someone who respected my ambitions and admired my success. It wasn't long before we were married in a glamorous ceremony that felt like a dream. But reality is rarely as beautiful as it seems. Derek came from an affluent family. His mother, Gloria Harper, was a retired socialite known for her sharp tongue and even sharper manipulation. His younger sister, Vanessa, was a 28-year-old freelance event planner with an air of entitlement and envy. At first, they welcomed me with open arms. Gloria would host elegant dinners, and Vanessa would chatter about her admiration for Eleanor Lux. I was naive enough to believe they genuinely cared. For the first few months of our marriage, I felt blissfully happy. Derek and I lived in a stunning home in Beverly Hills, and I poured my energy into growing Eleanor Lux. The company was thriving, becoming a staple in the sustainable fashion industry. But soon, subtle cracks began to appear in my seemingly perfect life. It started with small comments from Gloria. "Eleanor, darling, you should really involve Derek in your business," she'd say, her voice sweet but her gaze piercing. It's not good for a marriage when one partner is so much more successful than the other. Vanessa, too, would chime in, suggesting that I needed to loosen the reins and let family help me manage my empire. Their words planted a seed of doubt in Derek. I noticed him pulling away, becoming cold and distant. At first, I ignored it. I told myself they were just trying to be helpful, that Derek was adjusting to married life. But their true intentions became clear soon enough. Gloria and Vanessa were envious of my success, my independence. They saw my company not as a testament to my hard work, but as a prize to be claimed, a way to bolster their dwindling family fortune. I tried to keep peace, but things escalated quickly. Gloria began criticizing me openly, calling me selfish for refusing to let Derek support my business. Vanessa started dropping hints about how marriage meant sharing everything, including assets. Derek, eager to win their approval, became their puppet. He started questioning my decisions, accusing me of being controlling and unsupportive. It was heartbreaking to see the man I loved turning against me. The tipping point came when I discovered Gloria and Vanessa had forged legal documents to transfer partial ownership of Eleanor Lux to Derek. I found the papers in Derek's study one evening and felt my world shatter. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. Instead, he accused me of being paranoid and untrusting. "My mother and sister just want to help," he said. "Why are you so defensive?" I knew then that I couldn't rely on him. I hired a lawyer the next day to secure my assets and ensure that no one, not even my husband, could touch my company. Gloria and Vanessa weren't happy about that. They began a campaign to isolate me. Gloria spread rumors among our social circle, painting me as a difficult, greedy woman. Vanessa would undermine me in conversations with potential business partners, claiming I was unstable. Derek? He stood by, watching it all happen, doing nothing to defend me. I started feeling like an outsider in my own home. The warmth I once felt in Derek's presence was gone, replaced by a cold indifference. I was trapped in a marriage where I was outnumbered, gaslit, and betrayed by the very people who were supposed to support me. But I'm not one to give up. I decided to keep my distance from the Harpers, focusing on my work and protecting what I had built. Still, a part of me hoped that Derek would come to his senses, that he would see how wrong it was to let his family manipulate him. That hope kept me going, even as the shadows around me grew darker. Looking back now, I see that those months were just the beginning. The betrayal, the lies, the violence, they were still to come. I didn't know it yet, but my life was about to spiral out of control in ways I could never have imagined. If I thought the subtle manipulations were bad, I was about to learn how much worse things could get. The Harper family didn't just want to undermine me, they wanted to destroy me. One evening, Gloria invited Derek and me to dinner at their family estate in Beverly Hills. By then, I had started avoiding their gatherings as much as possible, but Derek insisted. "It's just dinner," he said, brushing off my concerns. "They're trying to make amends. Maybe you should, too." The night started off deceptively normal. Gloria, with her usual polished grace, welcomed us as if nothing had ever happened. Vanessa played her role of the doting sister-in-law, showering me with compliments about my latest fashion line. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The smiles felt forced, the warmth fake. But I stayed, hoping against hope that maybe this time would be different. After dinner, Gloria brought up Eleanor Lux. "Eleanor, dear," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I really think you're being too hard on Derek. Marriage is about trust, and it seems like you don't trust him with the business." I clenched my teeth, trying to stay calm. "It's not about trust, Gloria. Eleanor Lux is my responsibility. I've worked too hard to hand it over to anyone." The room grew tense. Vanessa, never one to miss an opportunity, chimed in. "But isn't it Derek's responsibility, too? He's your husband. It's not fair to keep him out of such a big part of your life." Derek sat there silently, avoiding my gaze. That hurt more than anything else. When I tried to end the conversation, Gloria escalated. "You're being selfish, Eleanor. You've made this marriage all about you. You're treating Derek like an accessory." That was the last straw. I stood up, ready to leave. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to this," I said firmly. "If you can't respect my boundaries, I won't waste my time." What happened next felt like a calculated move. Gloria erupted into a staged argument, shouting about how I was tearing their family apart. Vanessa, always the actress, pretended to be on the verge of tears. Derek finally spoke, but instead of defending me, he accused me of being the problem. "You've changed, Eleanor," he said. "You used to care about family, but now it's all about your company." I left the house that night, shaking with anger and heartbreak. I couldn't believe how easily Derek had turned against me. That was the moment I realized I was completely alone in this fight. The Harpers weren't going to stop, and Derek was never going to choose me over them. A week later, the unthinkable happened. I was driving home late at night after a long meeting with my lawyer when my brakes failed. It happened so suddenly. One moment, I was approaching an intersection, and the next, I couldn't slow down. I remember the sound of screeching tires, the blinding lights of an oncoming car, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My body was battered, my head pounding, and my memory foggy. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. The police initially ruled it as a mechanical failure, but deep down I knew better. It wasn't an accident. The Harpers had crossed a line. They wanted me out of the picture for good. Lying there in that hospital bed, I felt a mix of emotions: fear, anger, and, most of all, determination. I wasn't going to let them win. They had tried to steal my company, ruin my reputation, and now they had tried to take my life. But they didn't realize who they were dealing with. I wasn't the same trusting, naive woman who had walked into their lives. They had pushed me too far, and I was done playing their game. My assistant, Maria Alvarez, visited me every day during my recovery. Maria was more than an employee. She was my friend and confidant. When I told her my suspicions about the Harpers, she believed me without hesitation. "Whatever you need, Eleanor, I'm here," she said, her voice steady and full of resolve. I also reached out to my best friend, Ryan Carter, a tech-savvy entrepreneur who had been like a brother to me. Ryan had always been skeptical of Derek and his family, and now I understood why. "We'll get to the bottom of this," he promised. "But you have to be smart about it. Don't let them know you're onto them." Ryan and Maria became my inner circle, the people I trusted to help me fight back. Together, we started piecing together the events leading up to the accident. Ryan dug into Derek's and Vanessa's communications, while Maria kept an eye on Gloria's social connections. What we found was chilling. Vanessa had been in contact with a shady mechanic just days before the crash. Gloria had been making large withdrawals from the family trust, possibly to pay for something illegal. And Derek? He had been unusually quiet, but his silence spoke volumes. I decided to play along, pretending to forgive Derek and the Harpers. I needed to gather more evidence before making my move. It was a dangerous game, but I had no choice. They thought they had won, that I was broken and defeated. But they couldn't have been more wrong. This was far from over. When I left the hospital, I wasn't just recovering, I was reborn. The Eleanor who trusted too easily was gone. In her place was a woman fueled by determination and anger, ready to fight for her life, her company, and her dignity. But I knew I had to be careful. If the Harpers were willing to go as far as attempting to kill me, there was no telling what they'd do next. I returned home, to Derek. Yes, I went back. It wasn't because I forgave him, but because I needed to keep up the act. If they suspected I was onto them, they might cover their tracks. When I walked through the door, Derek greeted me with feigned relief. "Eleanor, thank God you're okay," he said, pulling me into a hug. I stood stiff in his arms, pretending to believe him. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the forgiving wife. I told Derek I wanted to put everything behind us, to focus on healing and moving forward. Gloria and Vanessa ate it up. "I knew you'd come to your senses," Gloria said with a smug smile during one of our dinners. Inside, I was seething, but I kept my composure. Behind the scenes, I was building my case. Ryan and Maria worked tirelessly, helping me piece together the puzzle. Ryan managed to recover text messages and emails between Vanessa and the mechanic who had tampered with my brakes. The messages left no doubt. She had orchestrated the accident. Gloria's financial records, which Ryan hacked into with his usual flair, showed suspicious withdrawals that coincided with the mechanic's payments. And Derek? His bank account showed a sudden influx of cash, likely his reward for standing by and letting them use him as their puppet. Maria, meanwhile, dug into the legal documents Gloria and Vanessa had forged. She contacted my lawyer and helped compile evidence proving the signatures were falsified. We even discovered that Gloria had been spreading rumors among my business contacts, trying to tarnish my reputation. It was a coordinated attack from every angle, but now I had the proof I needed to fight back. The hardest part was keeping up appearances. Living with Derek was unbearable. Every time I looked at him, I felt disgusted. I wanted to scream at him, to confront him about everything he had done. But I knew I couldn't tip my hand. Not yet. Instead, I acted as though I was rebuilding trust, even going so far as to share updates about Eleanor Lux with him. It was exhausting, but it worked. He and his family believed they had broken me, that I was too weak to fight back. The turning point came during a charity gala hosted by one of my industry connections. It was the kind of glamorous event the Harpers loved, full of wealthy socialites and influential figures. Gloria insisted that Derek and I attend together. "It's important to show everyone you're still a united front," she said. I agreed, knowing it would be the perfect stage for what I had planned. That night, I wore a sleek black dress from Eleanor Lux, a reminder of everything I had built on my own. Derek, clueless as ever, was all smiles as we mingled with the crowd. Gloria and Vanessa basked in the attention, acting as though they were the stars of the evening. But I wasn't there to play their game. I was there to end it. Toward the end of the evening, I took the stage under the guise of giving a speech about my company. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves twisting in my stomach. "I want to thank you all for your support of Eleanor Lux. But tonight, I have something more important to share." I looked out into the crowd, my gaze locking on Gloria and Vanessa. Their smiles faltered as I continued. "Over the past year, I've faced challenges that have tested me in ways I never imagined. But through it all, I've learned the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it means standing alone." At that moment, Ryan, who was running the AV system, projected the evidence onto a large screen behind me. The emails, text messages, financial transactions, it was all there for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I detailed the Harpers' schemes. I didn't name them outright, but the evidence spoke for itself. Gloria and Vanessa tried to leave, but security stopped them. "You're not going anywhere," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a knife. "Not until you face the consequences of your actions." Derek was pale, his confidence shattered. He tried to approach me, but I stepped back.
"Don't even think about it," I said.
"You're just as guilty as they are." By the time the police arrived, the Harpers' social facade had crumbled. Gloria and Vanessa were arrested on charges of forgery, fraud, and attempted murder. Derek, though not directly involved in the accident, was publicly humiliated. I filed for divorce the very next day, ensuring he left with nothing. As I walked out of the gala that night, I felt a sense of relief. The battle wasn't over. I still had to testify in court and rebuild my life, but for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The Harpers had underestimated me, but they would never make that mistake again. After the gala, everything moved quickly. The Harpers were finally exposed for what they truly were: schemers, fraudsters, and, in Vanessa's case, an attempted murderer. Watching them be taken away in handcuffs felt like the first real victory I'd had in a long time. But I wasn't done yet. If they thought their public disgrace was the end of my fight, they were wrong. It was only the beginning. The legal proceedings began within weeks. Gloria and Vanessa faced multiple charges: forgery, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. My lawyer, a formidable woman named Linda Marshall, made sure no stone was left unturned. Linda was relentless in her pursuit of justice, and having her by my side gave me a sense of security I hadn't felt in months. The courtroom became a battleground. Gloria, ever the manipulative socialite, tried to play the victim. "I was only trying to help my son," she claimed, tears streaming down her face. Vanessa, on the other hand, remained defiant, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. But their lies unraveled under the weight of the evidence. Ryan's expertise and Maria's diligence had ensured we had an airtight case. The forged documents, the bank transactions, and the communications with the mechanic who tampered with my car were impossible to refute. Derek was called to testify, and watching him squirm under questioning was almost satisfying. He tried to minimize his involvement, blaming Gloria and Vanessa for everything. "I didn't know what they were planning," he said, his voice shaky. "I just went along with it because I didn't want to upset my family." His excuses didn't matter. The damage was done, and his role in their schemes was clear. While Derek wasn't charged with any crimes, his reputation was ruined. His real estate career was effectively over, and he became a pariah in our social circles. I filed for divorce as soon as the trial began, and it was finalized quickly. Thanks to my legal preparations, he left the marriage with nothing, not a single penny from Eleanor Lux or my personal assets. The trial lasted for months, and every day I walked into that courtroom, I felt a mixture of anger and determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every woman who had ever been betrayed, manipulated, or underestimated. When the verdict was finally announced, it was as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Gloria and Vanessa were found guilty on all counts. Vanessa received a lengthy prison sentence for the attempted murder, while Gloria faced several years behind bars for her role in the fraud and conspiracy. The media covered the trial extensively, and I became an unwitting public figure. At first, I hated the attention, but as time went on, I realized it was an opportunity to turn my pain into something meaningful. I began speaking out about my experiences, sharing my story to inspire others to stand up against abuse and betrayal. With the legal battles behind me, I turned my focus back to Eleanor Lux. The company had suffered during the ordeal, but my loyal team and customers rallied around me. Sales surged as people connected with my story and admired my resilience. I poured my heart into rebuilding, introducing new designs that reflected my journey. Bold, unapologetic, and unbreakable. But I wanted to do more. The Harpers' betrayal had taken so much from me, but it had also taught me the importance of helping others. I used part of my company's profits to launch a foundation dedicated to supporting women in toxic relationships and abusive marriages. The foundation provides legal aid, counseling, and resources to help women rebuild their lives, just as I had. Maria became the foundation's director, her dedication and empathy making her the perfect fit. Ryan, ever the tech genius, developed an online platform to connect women with support networks and resources. Together, we turned my pain into purpose, creating something that would outlive the Harpers' treachery and ensure their actions weren't in vain. Despite everything, there were moments when the scars of what I had endured felt overwhelming. Nights when I would wake up from nightmares of the accident, or days when the memory of Derek's betrayal would hit me like a wave. But I learned to face those feelings, to let them fuel my determination rather than consume me. One day, after a particularly successful charity event for the foundation, Maria said something that stayed with me. "You didn't just survive, Eleanor. You transformed. And because of that, so many others will have the chance to do the same." She was right. The Harpers had tried to break me, but instead, they had made me stronger. They had underestimated my resilience, my intelligence, and my will to fight back. And now, they were paying the price for their greed and cruelty. As I sit here today, reflecting on everything I've been through, I feel a sense of peace. I reclaimed my life, my company, and my dignity. I turned my pain into a purpose that would help others find their strength. The Harpers are a distant memory now, their glamorous lives reduced to scandal and disgrace. Derek? I don't know where he is, and I don't care. What I do know is this. I'm free. I'm stronger than ever. And I'll never let anyone take that away from me again. My story isn't just about survival, it's about triumph. It's about proving that no matter how dark things get, the light inside you can always find a way to shine. My name is Emma. I'm 28 years old, living in Chicago. Growing up, I didn't have the typical childhood. I lost my parents when I was just a little girl in a car accident. I remember very little about them, only flashes of happiness before everything changed. The rest of my early years were spent in an orphanage, then foster homes. For most of my life, I wondered what it would have been like to have a family, people who cared about me, people who would love me unconditionally. But all that changed when I was adopted. My adoptive parents, Martha and Thomas, were wealthy, well known in the city for their philanthropic work. They never made a big deal about the adoption, keeping it quiet so the public wouldn't know. As a child, I never quite understood why they kept everything so hush-hush. But as I grew older, I realized it was to protect their image and their privacy. They loved me, of course, but there was always a certain distance between us, something I could never fully explain. I lived a life of luxury, but it was often isolating. I learned early on to stay out of the spotlight, to be grateful for the life I had without asking too many questions. When I turned 22, everything changed again. I was at university when I met Ethan. He was 30 at the time, a businessman from a prominent family. His family was even wealthier than mine, and they had a name that carried weight. Ethan was charming, genuine, and most importantly, kind. I'd never met anyone like him. We quickly became inseparable. His smile could light up a room, and his words always made me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. Our relationship blossomed. We graduated together, and soon after, Ethan proposed. Everything seemed perfect. But there was one problem: Ethan's parents. They didn't like me. From the moment they met me, they made it clear that I wasn't their idea of the right match for their son. They had expectations of wealth, status, and lineage. I wasn't from their world, and they made sure I knew it. I remember the first time I met them like it was yesterday. Ethan had warned me, "They're going to be hard on you, Emma. They have high standards. But just be yourself, and I'll be with you every step of the way." I was nervous, of course.
Who wouldn't be?
His parents were the kind of people who threw lavish parties and hosted grand events. I, on the other hand, came from a background where a nice dinner out was a treat. But I tried to put my worries aside. After all, Ethan was by my side. He was always there for me, reassuring me that nothing else mattered except what we had between us. The first meeting didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. Ethan's mother, Margaret, greeted me with a cold smile, while his father, Richard, barely acknowledged my presence. I tried to make polite conversation, but it was clear that they weren't interested in getting to know me. Their eyes gave me the feeling that I wasn't welcome, and no matter how much I tried to fit in, I just couldn't shake the feeling that they were judging me. Ethan noticed, of course. He always did. After the dinner, we got into an argument. "Emma, they're just trying to figure you out. They'll come around," he assured me, though his voice had a nervous edge to it. But I knew that no matter what, I would always be an outsider in their eyes. I was from the wrong world. Still, we pressed on. Ethan and I got engaged, deciding that our love was worth fighting for. Despite his family's disapproval, we eloped. We didn't tell anyone at first. We wanted to keep it private, between just the two of us. But as time went on, it became harder to ignore the tension. Ethan and I had a perfect life in many ways, but it wasn't enough to silence the undercurrent of his family's judgment. One day, his parents invited us to a special dinner. Ethan mentioned that a very important guest was coming, someone he referred to as a business associate. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of another dinner with his parents, but I agreed to go. After all, I wanted to make a good impression. I was still trying to earn their approval, even though deep down, I knew it was probably a lost cause. Little did I know that dinner would change everything. Ethan and I arrived at his parents' home that evening. The house was grand as always, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city. The table was set perfectly, with expensive china and crystal glasses. The guest of honor had yet to arrive, but I could sense the tension in the air. Ethan seemed a little more anxious than usual, and I couldn't help but wonder if this guest was someone even more important than I had imagined. We sat down, waiting for the meal to begin. I tried to engage in small talk with Ethan's parents, but their responses were cold, almost like they were doing this out of obligation. Then, the doorbell rang. Margaret quickly stood up. "That must be him," she said briskly. As she opened the door, a man entered the room, tall, with sharp features and a commanding presence. He looked around the room, and for a moment, his eyes locked with mine. He froze. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Margaret and Richard seemed to tense up, and I felt my heart race. Something was off. The man, who I now realized was the business associate, stepped closer. He looked at me again, his eyes wide with disbelief. My breath caught in my throat. He slowly walked toward me, his gaze fixed on my face. "No, it can't be," he murmured, almost to himself. Then, to my shock, he pointed at my cheek. "You have the mole," he said, his voice filled with awe. "It's you, it's really you." I stared at him, confused. What was he talking about? My hand instinctively touched the mole on my cheek, something I had never thought twice about before. I looked at Ethan, but he seemed just as stunned as I was. The man stepped closer, his voice trembling now. My daughter was kidnapped years ago. You're her?" The room went silent. Everyone's eyes were on me. I could feel my pulse racing, my thoughts spinning. What was happening? Was this a joke? Who was this man, and why was he saying such outrageous things? Was this even possible? The man continued, his eyes never leaving me. "I've been searching for you for years, and I never stopped. You're the one. The mole on your cheek, it's the key. You're my daughter." "I know it." I didn't know how to respond. My mind was swirling. How could this be real? How could I be this man's daughter? I had no memory of any of it. The man turned to Ethan's parents. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know she was here?" he demanded. Richard and Margaret exchanged uncomfortable glances. Ethan stood there, his mouth agape, unable to say anything. And in that moment, everything shifted. The room was dead silent. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest as I stood there, frozen. This man, who had just walked into the room like any other guest, was now claiming to be my father. I glanced at Ethan, who was still in shock, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. His parents, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable, their usual cold composure now faltering. It was like the world around me had stopped spinning, and I was stuck in a moment that didn't make sense. I don't know what you're talking about," I stammered, my voice shaky. I don't remember anything about being kidnapped." The man, whose name I still didn't know, took another step toward me. "I understand. It's a lot to take in, but I've spent years searching for you. I'm Nathaniel Crane. Your real father. My mind was reeling. Nathaniel Crane? That name sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I looked over at Ethan, my eyes searching for some kind of answer. But he was just as lost as I was. His parents remained quiet, and I could see the uncomfortable tension in their eyes. Ethan, can you explain this? What is going on? I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan stepped forward, still clearly processing the situation. He glanced at his parents, then back at me. Emma, I didn't know. I had no idea. Nathaniel gave a small, regretful shake of his head. I didn't expect you to. This isn't something you were ever meant to be involved in. I've kept this from everyone until now. I felt the weight of his words, like they were sinking into me. My real father had been searching for me, and somehow, I had ended up in Ethan's life, living a completely different reality. My head was spinning. I had no memories of being kidnapped or of any other life outside of the one I knew with Martha and Thomas. My life had always seemed like a dream, a perfect picture. And now, everything was falling apart. You have to understand, Nathaniel continued, his voice calmer now. You were taken when you were just a little girl. I've never stopped looking for you, Emma. Your mother and I, he hesitated, his eyes darkening with sadness. We never gave up hope. I could feel my stomach churn. Was this really happening? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? My whole life, I had been told that my parents died in a car crash. But now this man was telling me I had been kidnapped. And as if that wasn't enough, he was insisting that I was his daughter. Margaret spoke up for the first time since Nathaniel's revelation. Nathaniel, this is ridiculous, she snapped, her voice tense. We don't know who you are. And for you to come here, claiming to be her father, this is not the time or the place. Nathaniel's eyes shifted from Margaret to Richard, and the room grew colder. I don't care about your feelings, Margaret. This is about Emma. She deserves to know the truth, and she deserves to know who she really is. I felt a mix of anger and confusion bubbling up inside of me. How could my parents, Martha and Thomas, never have told me any of this? Why had they kept it hidden? And why was Ethan's family suddenly acting like this was all just some inconvenient interruption in their perfect world? Ethan stepped forward, his voice barely audible. Emma, I'm so sorry. I never knew anything about this. I swear, if I had known, I couldn't look at him. My mind was too overwhelmed. I had always thought that Ethan and I were building a life together, but now it felt like I didn't know who he was either. How could I trust him when everything about my past was suddenly in question? Nathaniel looked at me again, his eyes filled with a mixture of hope and sadness. Emma, I know this is overwhelming, but please just listen. I've spent years looking for you. You're my daughter, and I want to make sure you have everything you deserve. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my brain. How can I even believe you? I asked, my voice breaking. How can I trust anything you say when everything I thought I knew about myself is wrong? Ethan reached out to me, his voice soft. Emma, please.
I don't know what to say.
I'm just as lost in this as you are. But we'll figure it out. We can take this slow, together. But I couldn't. The words didn't make sense. I couldn't just go along with this. I needed answers and I needed time. This man couldn't just waltz into my life and claim to be my father. I needed proof. I needed to understand why all of this was happening. Nathaniel seemed to sense my doubt. He took a step back, giving me some space. I understand, Emma. I don't expect you to trust me right away. But please, just know that I've never stopped looking for you. I'll give you all the time you need. The silence in the room was suffocating. I looked at Ethan, then at his parents. I could see the tension in their faces, the way they were trying to mask their discomfort. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. This is too much, I finally whispered, more to myself than anyone else. I needed time. I needed to think. I need to go home. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but I shook my head. No, I need to be alone. I grabbed my coat and headed toward the door. Ethan followed, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I was too overwhelmed. My entire life was a lie, and I had no idea where to go from here. As I stepped outside into the cold Chicago air, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. The night felt darker than ever, and I couldn't help but wonder how everything would change from this moment forward. The cold wind hit my face as I stepped out into the dark Chicago night, and I felt my chest tighten with every breath. My mind was still racing, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to get away from it all. I needed space to think, to breathe, away from the people who seemed to have every answer except the one I needed the most. Who am I really? I walked aimlessly through the streets, the city lights blurring around me. I had to process what Nathaniel had said, what he claimed was true. My whole life was a lie, or at least it felt like it was. Was I really his daughter? How could I have been kidnapped, and why was I only finding out now? The more I tried to think it through, the more questions piled up, and the less clear everything became. As I wandered, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Ethan. "Emma, please let me explain. I'm worried about you. Please come home." I stopped in my tracks, staring at the message. I could feel my anger building again. Why did he think he had the right to ask me to come home? What did he think would change if I just returned to that house, where everything had been turned upside down? He had no idea how much this hurt. How much everything had been ripped from me in one night. I ignored the message and kept walking. Ethan's words still echoed in my mind. "We'll figure it out, together." It was a lie. How could we figure it out when everything I thought I knew about myself was now uncertain? How could I trust him when he had never even questioned the perfect world his parents had created for him? Eventually, I ended up at a quiet park by the lake, a place I used to go to when I needed peace. The city's noise felt miles away here. I sat on a bench, looking out at the water. The world felt distant, and I felt smaller than ever. A part of me wanted to believe Nathaniel, to believe that he really was my father. After all, if what he said was true, then it meant I wasn't just some orphan lost to the world. But the other part of me, the one that had grown up with Martha and Thomas, couldn't accept it. I had been happy with my life, or at least I thought I was. But now, everything felt like it was slipping away. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the recent messages. I saw texts from Martha and Thomas. "Are you okay, Emma? We're worried about you." They must have known about what happened at the dinner. I hadn't spoken to them in hours, and I couldn't bring myself to call them. Not yet. They were the ones who raised me, the ones I'd always known as my parents. But now, they seemed like strangers too. How could they have kept something so important from me? Another message from Ethan came through. "I'll give you space, but I can't let you face this alone." I sighed. I didn't want him to be part of this, not right now. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep running forever. I had to face this, whatever it was. I had to find out the truth. I stayed in the park for a while longer, letting my mind slowly settle. I had always prided myself on being independent, on handling things on my own. But this was too much. It was too big. I needed help. And no matter how much it stung, I knew I had to reach out to the only people who had always been there for me, Martha and Thomas. I called them. "Emma, sweetheart, are you okay?" Martha's voice was gentle, but filled with concern.
"I don't know, Mom. I
don't know what's real anymore." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I don't know what you're talking about, Emma. Please tell me what happened." And I did. I told her everything about Nathaniel, the man who claimed to be my real father, the kidnapping, the mole on my cheek. I told her how I felt like my entire life had been one big lie. I told her about Ethan's parents, about the dinner, about how everything had come crashing down so quickly. Martha listened quietly, her voice calm but full of sadness when she finally spoke. "Emma, I wish we could have told you earlier. I wanted to, but we never thought it was the right time. Your father, and I didn't know how to explain everything to you. We didn't want to hurt you. Did you know about this?" I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. "Did you know about Nathaniel? About my real families?" There was another long pause, and I could almost hear the hesitation in her voice. "Yes, Emma, we knew. We found you when you were just a baby, and Nathaniel had been searching for you ever since. We didn't want to tell you because we were afraid of what it might do to you, to our family. But we've always loved you, and we always will. You are our daughter." I could feel the weight of her words press down on me, but they didn't give me the clarity I was hoping for. How could they have kept this from me? How could they have let me grow up thinking I was an orphan, only to find out that I wasn't? "I don't know what to do, Mom," I whispered. "I don't know if I can trust anyone anymore." She took a deep breath. "Emma, I know this is hard. I can't imagine what you're going through. But you don't have to go through alone. We're here for you, and we always will be." "Do you think I should meet Nathaniel?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. Martha hesitated. "That's something only you can decide, sweetheart. But whatever you choose, know that you are loved. And you always have been." I hung up the phone, feeling both comforted and more lost than ever. My life was split between two worlds, neither of which seemed to fit anymore. Nathaniel, my biological father, had found me. But what did that even mean? Could I just turn my back on everything I had known? The questions were endless, and the answers were still out of reach. As I made my way back home, I realized one thing. I couldn't ignore this any longer. I had to face whatever was waiting for me.
But how?
And where did Ethan fit into all of this? I didn't have the answers. But I knew one thing. The hardest part of this journey was only just beginning. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions, tried to live my life, but nothing felt normal. Everything felt like it had shifted, like I was standing on unstable ground, unsure of where I was going or who I was anymore. I barely slept, barely ate. My mind was consumed by questions, by Nathaniel, by Ethan, by Martha and Thomas. It all felt like a tangled mess I couldn't unravel. Ethan kept calling, texting, asking to meet. But I didn't know what to say to him. How could I look him in the eye after everything that had happened? After learning that his family, who I had been trying so hard to impress, had known nothing about my past? I was caught between my loyalty to Ethan, the man I had loved, and the shocking truth about my real identity. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of trying to block out the noise of my thoughts, I found myself standing in front of the mirror in my apartment. My hand rested on the mole on my cheek, the one that had been the key to unlocking this entire storm of chaos. I stared at my reflection, trying to make sense of it all. Was I Emma Crane, the daughter of a wealthy billionaire who had spent years searching for me? Or was I still Emma, the girl raised by Martha and Thomas, who had known nothing but love from them?
My phone buzzed again.
It was a text from Ethan. "Please, Emma, can we just talk?" I didn't respond right away. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But the truth was, I missed him. I missed the life we had before all of this. I missed the certainty of our love, the simplicity of it. I didn't want to face the reality that everything had changed, but I couldn't hide from it forever. So I called him. "Emma?" His voice was tentative, hesitant. I could hear the relief in his tone when he heard my voice. "I've been trying to get a hold of you. I just want to know you're okay." I need to explain everything. I closed my eyes for a moment, collecting my thoughts. "Ethan, I don't even know where to begin. I don't know if I can keep doing this. This whole situation, it's too much." "I know," he said softly. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I should have been there for you when you needed me the most, but I didn't understand. I didn't know what you were going through. Please, Emma, just give me a chance to make it right." I could hear the sincerity in his voice, but it wasn't enough. "Not anymore. I need to figure this out on my own, Ethan," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep being with you when everything feels so uncertain." There was a long silence before he spoke again. "I understand. But if you need space, I'll give it to you. I just want you to be happy." The pain in his voice hit me hard, but it didn't change anything. I wasn't sure what happiness looked like anymore. I wasn't sure who I was or what I wanted. "I'm sorry, Ethan," I said, my throat tightening. "I need time. I need to figure out what I'm supposed to do next." I ended the call and sat in silence for a long time. I thought about what I had learned about Nathaniel and what he had said. He wasn't just some stranger claiming to be my father. He had proof. He had been searching for me. But even with all that, there was a part of me that still didn't know if I could accept him into my life. The life I had known, the family that raised me, had always felt real, and no matter how many times I told myself to embrace the truth, I wasn't sure I could leave everything behind. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind still heavy with indecision. I took a deep breath, then dialed Nathaniel's number. My fingers trembled slightly as I waited for him to pick up. "Emma?" His voice was warm, relieved. "I'm so glad you called. I need to meet you," I said, the words coming out more forcefully than I had intended. I need answers. I can't keep living in the dark. I need to know the truth." "I understand," he said, and I could hear the emotion in his voice. "I'm here, Emma. Whenever you're ready." We agreed to meet later that afternoon. As I walked to the cafe where we were supposed to meet, my heart pounded in my chest. The decision I was about to make was huge. Was I ready to accept this new life, to leave behind the only family I had ever known? Or was I going to turn my back on everything I thought was real and step into a world that was unfamiliar, a world where my real father awaited me? When I arrived, Nathaniel was already there, waiting at a corner table. He stood up as soon as he saw me, his face filled with hope. I could see the same desperation in his eyes, the same need for answers that I felt. I sat down across from him, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. There was so much left unsaid, so much I needed to understand. "Emma," he began softly, "I know this is overwhelming, but I want you to know that I'm not here to force anything on you. I've spent my whole life searching for you, but I'll understand if you need more time. I just want you to know that I'm here for you. You're not alone." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words sinking in. But deep down, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living in the past, caught between two worlds. It was time to make a choice. "Thank you for finding me," I said, my voice trembling. "But I have a life here. A family, people who raised me. I can't just turn my back on them." Nathaniel nodded, his eyes sad but understanding. "I don't want you to choose between us, Emma. I only want you to have the chance to know the truth, to know who you really are. And whatever you decide, I'll support you." I looked at him one last time, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what my future held. But I knew one thing. The journey of self-discovery had only just begun. And whatever came next, I would face it head-on. I stood up from the table, taking one last look at Nathaniel. "Thank you," I whispered. I left the cafe and walked into the uncertain future, ready to face whatever came next. My selfish husband broke my trust by secretly giving his parents access to our joint business account, and they stole $50,000 to enjoy themselves. Their next plan was even more shocking, which I discovered when I read their secret conversations. The very next day, I took a bold step that metaphorically buried them alive. I've always believed in hard work and independence. From the time I was a little girl, growing up in Chicago, I knew I wanted to create something of my own. My grandmother, a seamstress, was my biggest inspiration. I used to sit by her side, watching her work tirelessly on her sewing machine, creating beautiful pieces from scraps of fabric. She used to tell me, "Anna, if you put your heart into something, you can create magic." Those words stuck with me, shaping who I became. Fast forward to my early 20s, I had just graduated with a degree in business, and I decided to follow in my grandmother's footsteps, not as a seamstress, but as a fashion entrepreneur. With a small loan and a lot of determination, I opened my boutique, Tailor's Threads, in the heart of Chicago. It wasn't much at first, a tiny space with a single display window, but I poured my soul into it. Slowly, word spread about my custom-made clothing and unique designs, and within a few years, my boutique became one of the most sought-after places for high-end, personalized fashion. By my late 30s, I had achieved what many people only dream of. Tailor's Threads was a thriving business with wealthy clients who appreciated the artistry and dedication behind every piece. I was proud of what I'd built. My life was full, busy, but fulfilling. The one thing I didn't have was someone to share it all with. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't unhappy being single. But sometimes, after a long day at work, I'd sit in my apartment, look at the city lights, and wonder if there was someone out there who'd understand me and my drive. That's when Ethan came into my life. We met at an art gallery opening, of all places. I remember how he introduced himself, confident but not arrogant, with a warm smile that immediately put me at ease. He was in his mid-40s, a financial consultant with a sharp sense of humor and an easygoing charm. Over the next few months, we got to know each other. Ethan seemed to admire my independence and my work ethic. He'd say things like, "I've never met someone as passionate and focused as you, Anna. It's inspiring." Hearing that felt like validation of everything I'd worked so hard for. We dated for about a year before he proposed. I was hesitant at first, not because I didn't love him, but because my business had always been my priority. Could I balance both? Ethan assured me he understood. "I'd never want to come between you and your dreams," he said. "I just want to be part of your life." It sounded perfect, didn't it? So I said yes. Our wedding was simple but beautiful, a small ceremony with close friends and family. That's when I met his parents, Helen and Frank. At first glance, they seemed like a sweet, retired couple. Helen was a retired school administrator, and Frank had worked as a mechanic before retiring early. They were warm and welcoming, doting on Ethan and eager to include me in their family. I didn't see the cracks back then, the subtle hints of control and entitlement. But hindsight, as they say, is 20/20ths. The first few months of married life were wonderful. Ethan moved into my apartment and we started sharing responsibilities. But things started to change when Helen and Frank began showing up unannounced. At first, it was just occasional visits, Helen bringing over a pie or Frank asking for advice on his car. But soon, it became a regular thing. Helen started offering suggestions for my boutique, most of which were out of touch with my brand. "You know, Anna," she'd say, "you should consider making more affordable pieces. Not everyone can afford those fancy dresses." I brushed it off as well-meaning advice, even when she started inviting her friends to the boutique and demanding discounts. I thought I was being kind, accommodating. What I didn't realize was that I was being taken advantage of. The first major red flag came about 6 months into our marriage. I'd been saving up to expand the boutique, maybe even open a second location. One day, while checking our joint account, I noticed a large withdrawal, $20,000. My heart sank. I immediately called Ethan. "Ethan," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "why is there $20,000 missing from our account?" There was a pause before he answered. "Oh, that," he said, sounding almost casual. "Mom and Dad were in a bit of a bind. They needed help paying off some debts, so I figured it was okay to use some of the money. It's our family, Anna. We help each other." I was stunned. That money was meant for the boutique. When I told him this, he looked genuinely apologetic. "I'm sorry, Anna. I should have talked to you first. It won't happen again. I promise." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think it was just a mistake, a one-time thing. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. I told myself I was overthinking it, that Ethan loved me and wouldn't hurt me intentionally. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was. But at that moment, I chose to trust him. After all, marriage is about trust, isn't it? I didn't realize how much trust could be broken. The thing about trust is that once it's shaken, it's hard to regain. After the $20,000 incident, I tried to move on, convincing myself that Ethan's mistake was a lapse in judgment and not a sign of something deeper. I buried myself in my work, expanding Taylor's threads and working on new designs for the upcoming fall collection. But it didn't take long for more cracks to appear. Helen's visits to the boutique became more frequent. She'd show up unannounced, offering her advice on how to run my business. "Anna," she'd say in that tone that made it sound like she was doing me a favor, "you should try offering group discounts. My bridge club would love that. Or, why don't you host a fashion show for the neighborhood? It could be a great way to connect with the community." At first, I politely declined, but Helen was persistent. She started inviting her friends to the boutique without asking me, promising them discounts or free alterations. I felt trapped. How do you say no to your mother-in-law without creating tension? I thought I was being gracious, but in hindsight, I was being walked all over. Then came the family fashion show. Helen proposed the idea casually one afternoon while we were having coffee. "Anna," she said, "I was thinking, why not host a fashion show at the boutique? We can invite some family and friends, and it'll be a fun way to showcase your work." I hesitated. Hosting an event like that would take time and resources, and it wasn't part of my business strategy. But Helen pressed on. "It'll be good for the boutique," she said. "And it's family. What's more important than that?" Ethan chimed in, siding with his mother. "It could be fun, Anna. And Mom's right, it might bring in more clients." I reluctantly agreed, thinking it was a harmless gesture. But when the day of the fashion show arrived, it was a disaster. Helen had invited over 50 people, most of them her friends, and they treated the boutique like a discount warehouse. They tried on clothes without asking, ignored the rules about handling custom pieces, and demanded family discounts on everything. I was mortified. The final straw that day was when Helen loudly announced, "Isn't Anna lucky to have a family like us to support hers?" I could barely keep the smile on my face as I watched her friends leave with armfuls of clothes, many of which were sold at prices that barely cover my costs. That night, I confronted Ethan. "Ethan, this has to stop. Your parents are interfering with my business. Helen is treating the boutique like her personal playground." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Anna, they're just trying to help. They don't mean any harm." "Helps?" I snapped. "They're costing me money, Ethan. This isn't just about feelings, it's about my livelihood." He looked at me with those pleading eyes, the ones that made me feel guilty for even bringing it up. "I'll talk to them," he said. "I'll make sure they back off." But he didn't. Things only got worse. A few weeks after the fashion show, I noticed something strange when I logged into my boutique's business account. There was a withdrawal of $50,000, a staggering amount that I hadn't authorized. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the transactions, trying to make sense of it. That money was meant for payroll and inventory. Without it, the boutique could be in serious trouble. I called Ethan immediately. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking, "did you take $50,000 from the business account?" There was a long pause before he answered. "Anna, it wasn't just me. Mom and Dad needed it. They were planning a trip to Europe and—" "Stop." I cut him off, my voice trembling with anger. "You gave them access to my business account? Ethan, do you even realize what you've done? That money wasn't for vacations. It was for the boutique." "Anna, calm down," he said, as if my anger was unreasonable. "It's just money. We can make it back." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's not just money, Ethan. It's my hard work, my business. And you gave them access without even asking me?" He tried to defend himself, saying it was family helping family again, but I couldn't listen. I hung up and spent the rest of the night trying to figure out how to cover the boutique's expenses. The next day, I confronted Helen. "Why did you think it was okay to take $50,000 from my business account?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. Helen didn't even flinch. "Oh, Anna, don't be so dramatic," she said. "Ethan said it was fine. And besides, you're doing so well. What's a little bit of money? We're family after all." Her casual dismissal of my hard work was like a slap in the face. But the worst was yet to come. A week later, I stumbled upon an email exchange between Helen and Ethan. My stomach turned as I read the messages. Helen had convinced Ethan to marry me, not because he loved me, but because she saw my boutique as a goldmine for their family. She referred to me as the jackpot and discussed ways they could benefit from my success. I sat there in shock, the words blurring on the screen. The man I thought loved me had been complicit in his parents' schemes all along. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about money. It was about betrayal. My marriage wasn't built on love, it was built on manipulation. I knew I couldn't let them get away with this. But I also knew I had to be smart about it. They had underestimated me, thinking I was too trusting, too naive. They were wrong. When you find out the people closest to you have betrayed you, it's like the ground beneath your feet vanishes. That's how I felt after reading those emails. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about everything, my trust, my marriage, my dignity. Ethan and his parents had been manipulating me from the start, seeing me as nothing more than a way to fund their lifestyle. I didn't cry. I didn't even scream. I sat there, staring at my laptop, my mind racing. I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The first thing I did was secure my business. I went to my bank the very next morning and removed Ethan's name from all the accounts. I froze every joint credit card and set up new passwords for all my accounts. It felt like I was reclaiming something they had stolen from me, control. Then I hired a lawyer. I explained everything, the unauthorized withdrawals, the emails, and even Helen's blatant interference in my business. My lawyer was sharp, and her eyes narrowed as I laid out the details. "We have a case," she said firmly. "But you'll need evidence to back all this up." That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. If Helen and Frank had been this bold with me, I wondered what other schemes they'd been involved in. I needed to know everything. The investigator worked quickly. Within weeks, he uncovered a web of deceit. Helen and Frank had been living far beyond their means for years. They had maxed out credit cards, taken out loans they couldn't repay, and even falsified documents to cover their tracks. They'd done it all under the guise of being a sweet, retired couple, relying on people like me to foot the bill. I also discovered that Helen had been bad-mouthing me to Ethan behind my back, calling me cold and selfish whenever I tried to set boundaries. She'd manipulated him into thinking he was doing the right thing by siding with her. And Ethan? He'd let her. He'd let her destroy the trust in our marriage because he was too weak to stand up to her. But what hurt the most was realizing how long this had been going on. Helen had convinced Ethan to marry me not because he loved me, but because she saw my boutique as a gold mine. I was nothing more than a means to an end for them. I decided to confront them all at once. I didn't want this to drag on. I wanted it over. So, I invited Ethan, Helen, and Frank to the boutique after hours, saying I had something important to discuss. When they arrived, Helen was all smiles, acting like she owned the place. "Anna, darling, what's all this about?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I didn't waste time. I handed them copies of the emails, the bank statements, and the investigator's report. "This is what it's about," I said, my voice steady. Ethan's face paled as he scanned the documents. Helen, however, barely blinked. "Anna, you're overreacting," she said, waving the papers dismissively. "We're family. Families share things." "Family?" I said, my voice rising. "You've lied to me, stolen from me, and treated my business like your personal ATM. You don't get to call this family." Frank tried to jump in. "Now hold on, Anna. Let's not make this bigger than it is." "Bigger than it is?" I snapped, my anger finally breaking through. "You drained $50,000 from my business account. You manipulated Ethan into marrying me for my money. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's fraud." Ethan looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Anna, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I love you." I laughed bitterly. "Love? Is that what you call this? Love doesn't scheme. Love doesn't lie. You chose them over me every single time." Helen's sweet facade cracked then. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she snapped. "We did what we had to do. And you're not exactly innocent. You let us in. Don't act like you didn't benefit from having us around." I stared at her, stunned by the audacity. "Benefit? All you've done is take. But that ends today." I took a deep breath and said the words I'd been holding on to. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm pressing charges. I've already spoken to my lawyer, and I have all the evidence I need. You're going to pay back every penny you stole." The room fell silent. For the first time, Helen looked nervous. Frank shifted uncomfortably, and Ethan just stood there, his head hanging. Helen tried one last time. "Anna, be reasonable. Think about what this will do to Ethan." "I am thinking about Ethan," I said coldly. "And this is the best thing I can do for him. Cut him loose." I walked out of the boutique, leaving them behind to process what had just happened. My hands were shaking, but I felt lighter than I had in months. I wasn't done yet. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control. I walked out of my boutique that night feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But I knew the battle wasn't over yet. Confronting Ethan, Helen, and Frank was just the beginning. There were legal matters to settle, financial messes to clean up, and my life to rebuild. The very next day, I met with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers and file charges for financial fraud. The evidence I had collected was overwhelming: emails, bank statements, the investigator's report. My lawyer assured me we had a strong case. They won't be able to talk their way out of this, she said with confidence. Of course, Helen didn't go down quietly. She tried everything to manipulate the situation. She left me countless voicemails, switching between apologies and veiled threats. Anna, think about what you're doing, one message said. Do you really want to ruin Ethan's life? And what about us? We're family. But I didn't respond. I was done being her pawn. Ethan, on the other hand, showed up at my apartment one evening, looking disheveled and desperate. Anna, please, he said as I opened the door. Can we talk? I made a mistake. I let my parents get in the way, but I love you. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I looked at him, trying to see the man I had fallen in love with, but all I could see was someone who had betrayed me. Ethan, I said, my voice calm but firm, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice, over and over again. You chose them over me, over our marriage. And now you have to live with the consequences. He pleaded with me for what felt like hours, but my decision was final. I handed him the divorce papers and told him to leave. Over the next few months, the legal process played out. Helen and Frank tried to downplay their actions, claiming they didn't know what they were doing was wrong. But the evidence spoke for itself. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. They were ordered to repay the money they had stolen, and while it wouldn't happen overnight, knowing they were being held accountable was enough for me. Ethan didn't contest the divorce. I think, deep down, he knew there was no salvaging what we had. I made sure to cut all ties, blocking his number, and ensuring he had no access to my accounts or my life. With the legal matters behind me, I turned my focus back to Taylor's threads. My boutique had suffered during the chaos, but I was determined to bring it back stronger than ever. I introduced a new line of sustainable fashion, inspired by my grandmother's philosophy of creating beauty from simplicity. The response was incredible. My loyal clients returned, and new ones came flocking in. But it wasn't just about the boutique. I was rediscovering myself, the person I had been before Ethan and his family entered my life. I found joy in the little things again, experimenting with new designs, spending quiet evenings with a good book, and even taking long walks along the Chicago River. One evening, as I was scrolling through glowing reviews of my new collection, I got a call from my lawyer. Anna, she said, I thought you'd like to know that Helen and Frank's accounts have been frozen due to unpaid debts. They're officially bankrupt. I didn't feel joy or satisfaction, just relief. They could no longer manipulate anyone else the way they had manipulated me. The final chapter of this ordeal came a few months later. I had been invited to speak at a fashion event in New York, sharing my journey as a boutique owner. After the event, I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe, reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the woman I had been when I met Ethan, driven, independent, but maybe a little too trusting. And I thought about the woman I had become, stronger, wiser, and unapologetically myself. It wasn't an easy journey. There were moments when I felt broken, moments when I doubted myself. But in the end, I realized that their betrayal didn't define me. My response to it did. When I returned to Chicago, I felt ready to close this chapter of my life for good. I decided to hold a celebration at the boutique, a small gathering of friends, clients, and colleagues who had supported me through everything. As I stood there that evening, looking around at the people who genuinely cared for me, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about Ethan or his parents. I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I had gained: freedom, strength, and the knowledge that I could overcome anything. Before the night ended, one of my oldest clients approached me. Anna, she said with a smile, you've been through so much, but look at you now. You're an inspiration. I smiled back, feeling the truth in her words. I had been through hell, but I had come out the other side stronger than ever. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again. Not Anna, the wife or the victim, but Anna Taylor, the woman who built a life and business on her own terms. This was my story, and I was finally free to write the next chapter. My greedy husband brought his new mistress, and together, they plotted to end my life and take over my $2.5 million. When I retaliated, they locked me in a room and prepared to set it on fire. I immediately called the police, but before they arrived, a shocking surprise awaited them. My name is Sophia Anderson, and for most of my life, I believed I was one of the lucky ones. I'm 35, a doctor living in Chicago, and for 8 years, I thought I had a marriage built on trust and mutual respect. My husband, Ryan, was my partner in every sense of the word, or so I thought. He's 38, an entrepreneur with grand ideas and ambitions. Together, we had built a comfortable life. Or, at least, that's the illusion I clung to. Looking back now, there were signs, subtle ones, whispers of something not quite right. But when you're in love, it's easy to explain things away. Late-night business meetings? Ryan was just working hard for our future. Money missing from our joint account? He said it was temporary, a necessary investment for his business. I trusted him implicitly. I believed in our marriage, in him. It all began to unravel one evening, a quiet Sunday when Ryan was out. I was sorting through some paperwork in our home office, looking for an insurance document, when I stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see, a bank statement for an account I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but as I read through the numbers, my stomach twisted. There were transfers, large ones, totaling nearly $2.5 million. The dates and amounts didn't match anything we had discussed, and the name on the receiving account was unfamiliar, Amanda Blake. I sat there, staring at the paper, my mind racing.
Who was Amanda Blake?
Why was Ryan sending her money, our money? For a moment, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was business-related, I thought. But deep down, I knew something was very, very wrong. The next few days were a blur of confusion and denial. I couldn't bring myself to confront Ryan outright. Instead, I played the role of the supportive wife, all the while keeping my eyes open. And then I found more emails, receipts, and pictures. Amanda was no business associate. She was his mistress, a 28-year-old event planner who appeared to be living the high life, funded by my husband's deceit. The extravagant trips, designer clothes, and luxury apartment? All courtesy of Ryan. But the worst discovery came when I realized this wasn't just about infidelity. Ryan wasn't just betraying me emotionally, he was planning to leave me with nothing. Every financial move he made was calculated, siphoning money from our accounts, putting everything in his name, and ensuring that when he walked away, I'd be left with scraps. My entire future, everything I had worked for, was being stolen right under my nose. I couldn't cry, not at first. The anger was too raw, too overwhelming. I felt like a fool, like my entire life had been a lie. But as the initial shock wore off, I knew I couldn't let him win. I wasn't going to sit back and watch him destroy me. If Ryan wanted a fight, he was going to get one. I started small, careful not to tip him off. During the day, I continued my work at the hospital, saving lives and pretending everything was fine. At night, I became a different person, quietly gathering evidence, piecing together the full extent of Ryan's betrayal. I learned to hack into his accounts, uncovering more than I ever expected. It wasn't just our joint assets he was draining. Ryan was involved in something far bigger: fraudulent activities, money laundering, even tax evasion. The money he was funneling to Amanda wasn't just ours. It was dirty money, the kind that could destroy his entire business and land him in prison. I felt sick, but also a strange sense of power. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't the clueless wife anymore. I had the upper hand. But I also knew I couldn't do this alone. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous Ryan's schemes seemed. I needed help. That's when I reached out to Detective James Carter, a seasoned officer specializing in financial crimes. I remember sitting across from him in a small, dimly lit office, clutching the folder of evidence I had gathered. "I need your help. I told him, my voice trembling but firm. My husband, he's stealing from me, and I think he's breaking the laws. Detective Carter listened patiently as I laid it all out. The secret account, the mistress, the fraudulent activities. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge. When I finished, he leaned forward, his expression serious. Sophia, this is bigger than you realize. If what you're saying is true, your husband could be facing serious prison time. But you need to be careful. Men like this don't go down without a fight. His words sent a chill through me, but I nodded. I was ready. I had to be. There was no turning back now. Over the next few weeks, we worked together in secret, building a case against Ryan. I installed software on his laptop to track his activity, recorded phone calls, and even pretended to support his latest business venture to get closer to the truth. It was exhausting, living this double life, but I didn't have a choice. Ryan, oblivious to my plans, continued his charade. He smiled at me over dinner, talked about our future, and even had the audacity to bring Amanda into our home when he thought I was working late. I stayed quiet, biding my time, waiting for the right moment to strike. But I knew that moment wouldn't come easily. Ryan wasn't stupid, and the closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous he became. I could feel it, a tension growing between us, an unspoken suspicion in his eyes. He didn't know what I was up to yet, but he was starting to sense that I wasn't the naive, trusting wife he had built his plans around. And that's when I realized the true extent of what I was up against. Ryan wasn't just my husband, he was my enemy, and I was about to go to war. When you live with someone for 8 years, you get to know their rhythms, the little habits, routines, and quirks that make up daily life. But in those weeks after discovering Ryan's betrayal, I saw him in an entirely different light. Every smile, every casual comment, every touch felt like a mask hiding the monster underneath. And the hardest part? I had to wear a mask of my own. I continued gathering evidence with Detective Carter, all while pretending nothing had changed. Some nights I would sit at the dinner table, nodding along to Ryan's stories about clients and deals, knowing full well those clients didn't exist, and those deals were just money being funneled into Amanda's lifestyle. Ryan thought he was untouchable. He'd always been charming, the kind of man who could walk into a room and instantly win people over. That charm had fooled me for years, and now I realized it wasn't just me. He had fooled everyone. His colleagues, his friends, even our families. He was a master manipulator, and I was determined to beat him at his own game. But it wasn't easy. The more evidence I gathered, the more dangerous it became. Ryan was meticulous, always covering his tracks, and any slip on my part could have been disastrous. I couldn't afford to let him suspect anything, not yet. So, I played the role of the supportive wife perfectly, even as my anger simmered beneath the surface. One night, while Ryan was out on another one of his business meetings, I broke into his study. My hands trembled as I searched through his desk, his files, his computer. That's when I found it, the ledger. It was hidden in a locked drawer, buried under a stack of old documents. Inside, every transaction was meticulously recorded. The transfers to Amanda, the offshore accounts, the shell companies he used to launder money. It was all there. I took pictures of every page, my heart pounding with each snap of the camera. This was the smoking gun, the proof I needed to take him down. But it wasn't just the money. As I flipped through the pages, I found names, business associates, clients, even politicians, people tied to Ryan's schemes. It wasn't just about me anymore. Ryan was part of something much bigger, something dangerous. The weight of it all hit me that night as I sat alone in our bedroom, staring at the evidence I had collected. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a web of lies and crimes that could destroy lives. And I was in the middle of it. The next day, I met with Detective Carter. This is more than just financial fraud, I told him, handing over the photos of the ledger. Ryan's connected to people, powerful people. If we're going to take him down, we need to be careful. Carter nodded, his expression grim. You've done incredible work, Sophia. But you're right. This isn't just about your husband anymore. We're going to need a solid plan, and you need to be prepared for the fallout. The fallout. Those words stayed with me. As much as I hated Ryan, part of me still struggled with the idea of what I was about to do. This was the man I had loved, the man I had built a life with. Exposing him meant destroying everything we had, everything I thought we stood for. But there was no other way. He had made his choices, and now he had to face the consequences. As Carter and his team worked on their end, I focused on keeping up appearances. It wasn't easy. Ryan was growing more suspicious, watching me more closely. He'd ask questions about my work, my schedule, even my mood. "You've been distant lately," he said one night, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. "Is everything okay?" I forced a smile, pretending to be hurt. "You're the one who's always busy, Ryan. I barely see you these days. Maybe I'm just feeling lonely." It worked for the moment, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He wasn't convinced, and I knew I had to be more careful. The tension between us reached a boiling point a few days later. Ryan came home unexpectedly in the middle of the day, catching me off guard as I was going through his laptop. I barely had time to close it before he walked into the room. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Just checking emails," I lied, my heart racing. "The hospital's been sending updates about the new schedule." He didn't respond, just stared at me for a long moment. Then, without a word, he walked over and took the laptop from me. My hands clenched into fists as I watched him. He didn't say anything, but his silence spoke volumes. He was suspicious, and I had just made things worse. That night, I barely slept. Every sound, every creak of the house made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan was watching me, waiting for me to slip up again. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I found out he had brought Amanda into our home. I came home from a late shift at the hospital to find a pair of unfamiliar heels by the front door. My stomach dropped as I heard voices, Ryan's deep and familiar and a woman's, soft and flirtatious. I froze in the hallway, listening as they laughed together in the living room. For a moment, I wanted to storm in, to scream at them both, to tear the whole charade apart. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around and walked out the door, my hands shaking with rage. I couldn't let them see me like this, not yet. When I finally got home hours later, the house was empty, and Ryan was in bed, pretending to be asleep. I stood in the doorway, staring at him, my heart pounding with a mix of fury and fear. He didn't know it yet, but his time was running out. The game we were playing was dangerous, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came to a head. But I wasn't going to back down. I had come too far to stop now. Ryan thought he was untouchable, but he was wrong. And I was going to prove it. The night I came home to find Amanda's shoes in my house was a turning point. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the audacity. Ryan didn't even bother to hide it anymore. He was bringing his mistress into our home, the place we had built together. That night, as I stood in the cold outside our house, I made a decision. This had to end. And it had to end soon. Detective Carter had warned me to be careful, and he was right. Ryan's behavior was becoming more erratic. He was on edge, his temper flaring at the smallest things. One morning, he snapped at me over breakfast because the coffee was too hot. "You can't even do this right, Sophia," he muttered, slamming his mug down. I didn't react. I couldn't afford to. But inside I was seething. I knew the walls were closing in on him. The investigation was gaining momentum, and Carter's team was preparing to move. We had everything we needed. The ledger, the transfers, the evidence of fraud. The plan was simple: catch Ryan red-handed, with no room for escape. But I hadn't anticipated how dangerous he would become as the noose tightened. One evening, Ryan came home earlier than usual. His face was flushed, his movements frantic. He stormed into the living room, where I was reading, and threw a folder onto the coffee table. "Explain this," he demanded. I looked down and saw a printout of my recent phone records. My stomach sank. He had seen the calls to Detective Carter. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Don't lie to me, Sophia," he hissed, his voice low and threatening. "I know you've been talking to someone. Who is it? A lawyer? A private investigator? Do you think you're smarter than me?" His words sent a chill through me, but I refused to show fear. "You're paranoid, Ryan," I said calmly. "Maybe if you spent less time sneaking around with Amanda, you'd realize how ridiculous you sound." For a moment, he was stunned into silence. Then his face twisted in rage. "You think you can play games with me?" he shouted, stepping closer. "You think you're going to win?" Before I could react, he grabbed my arm, his grip tight and painful. "You don't know who you're dealing with, Sophia," he said, his voice cold and venomous. "You've made the biggest mistake of your life." I managed to pull away and ran to the bedroom, locking the door behind me. My heart was pounding as I dialed Carter's number. "It's happening," I whispered, my voice shaking. "He knows. I think he's going to hurt me." Carter's response was immediate. "Stay locked in that room. We're coming." The minutes felt like hours as I waited, listening to Ryan pacing outside the door, shouting threats. When I finally heard the sound of sirens, relief flooded through me. The police burst in, arresting Ryan before he could do any more harm. As they led him away, his eyes met mine, filled with fury and disbelief. "You'll regret this, Sophia," he spat. "I swear, you'll regret it." But I didn't regret it. Not for a second. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The nightmare was finally over, or so I thought. The moment Ryan was taken away in handcuffs should have felt like the end of the nightmare. But as I watched him being driven off, his threats still ringing in my ears, I knew this was far from over. The web of lies he had spun was too vast, too tangled, to unravel in one single night. My fight wasn't finished. It was just shifting to a new battleground. Detective Carter and his team wasted no time. With Ryan in custody, they raided his business offices and uncovered even more than we had anticipated. Hidden accounts, forged documents, and ties to an underground network of illegal activities came to light. Ryan hadn't just been siphoning money for Amanda's luxurious lifestyle. He had been laundering money for some very dangerous people. His entire empire was built on deceit and crime. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt a strange emptiness. This was the man I had loved, the man I had once dreamed of building a life with. Now, everything about him was a lie. The house we shared, the vacations, the laughter, it all felt tainted. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. The legal process was swift, and I had a role to play. The trial was a spectacle. Ryan's crimes shocked everyone. Our friends, our families, even Amanda. She showed up on the first day, dressed in designer clothes, looking every bit the part of the mistress who had thought she was winning. But as the evidence mounted, her smug demeanor crumbled. She wasn't just a pawn in Ryan's schemes. She was a willing participant, and she, too, faced consequences for her involvement. I testified in court, laying out everything I had discovered. It wasn't easy, standing there under the weight of Ryan's gaze, his fury palpable even from across the room. He refused to look at me most of the time, but when he did, his eyes were filled with hatred. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't remorseful. He was only angry that he had been caught. The judge didn't hold back. Ryan was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, and Amanda received her punishment as well. But it wasn't just about their crimes. It was about the lives they had destroyed. Ryan's business associates were implicated, employees lost their jobs, and families were affected. The fallout was immense, but justice had been served. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. The media frenzy around the case meant I couldn't escape the whispers, the stares. People treated me like a victim, and in a way I was. But I refused to let that define me. I had survived and I had fought back. That was what mattered. With the help of a good lawyer, I recovered most of the stolen assets. Ryan had tried to leave me penniless, but in the end, his plans failed. I sold the house, the one that had become a symbol of betrayal, and moved into a cozy apartment downtown. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, a place where I could start fresh. Detective Carter became a surprising source of support during this time. He reminded me that what I had done, standing up, fighting back, was no small feat. Most people wouldn't have had the courage to do what you did, he told me one afternoon. You not only saved yourself, but you helped us uncover something far bigger. His words stayed with me. For so long, I had felt powerless, like a pawn in Ryan's twisted game. But I had taken that power back, piece by piece, until it was mine again. One day, as I sat in my new home, sipping coffee and looking out at the city, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The scars Ryan had left, emotional and physical, were still there, but they didn't define me anymore. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to move forward. Ryan's arrest had been the climax, but my story didn't end there. It was a story of betrayal, yes, but also of resilience and justice. It was about refusing to be a victim, about fighting for the truth even when it seemed impossible. And, in the end, it was about reclaiming my life. I often think about what I would say to the woman I was before all of this, naive, trusting, blind to the cracks in her world. I would tell her that betrayal doesn't have to break you, that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest strength, and that no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way to fight back. Because that's what I did. I fought, and I won. My husband's secret affair with his young secretary was just the start. They worked together to plant hidden devices, making $40 million in stolen profits. But his next plan was even worse. The very next day, I got my revenge and left them shocked when they found out their $40 million was actually... My name is Emma Carter, and if you told me a year ago that my life would become the kind of drama you see in suspense novels, I would have laughed. I was living a perfectly normal life, or so I thought. I had a decent career as a journalist in Austin, Texas, where I wrote about local events, social issues, and sometimes politics. My husband, Ryan, was a senior executive at a big real estate firm, and our 16-year-old son, Ethan, was our pride and joy. Smart, driven, and incredibly gifted with technology, he had this knack for solving problems. I never imagined just how crucial that skill would become for us. It all started one Saturday morning. Ethan was in my office helping me set up some new software on my computer. I had promised him pancakes for breakfast, but he was laser-focused on the task as usual. "Mom, your chair feels weird," he said, running his hand along the base. "Like there's something stuck inside." I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was a loose screw or maybe a part of the chair's mechanism. But Ethan's curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed his toolbox from his room and started unscrewing the base. That's when he found it, a small, square device no bigger than a matchbox, taped discreetly inside the frame. "What is that?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. He turned the tiny device over in his hand, his face scrunched in concentration. "It's a transmitter," he said finally. "Looks like it's meant to record audio and maybe track your location." I laughed nervously. Sure, it had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe it's from when this chair was in the newsroom. It's probably old and broken. But Ethan wasn't convinced. He plugged the device into his laptop and started running some programs to figure out what it was doing. What he found changed everything. The device wasn't broken. It was very much active. It had been recording my conversations and even logging my location for months. Ethan showed me how it was transmitting data to an untraceable network. My heart sank as I realized that someone close enough to access my office, had planted it. My first instinct was to panic. Who would do this?
And why?
Ryan's name didn't even cross my mind at first. He was my husband of 15 years, the person I had trusted with everything. He was always busy with work, but I'd chalked that up to his high-pressure job. Never once did I suspect him of anything sinister. Ethan, however, was more practical. "We need to figure out where this data is going," he said. "If this thing has been in here for months, someone's been watching you, Mom." I called Megan, my best friend from college and a cybersecurity expert. When I explained what we'd found, her reaction was immediate. "Emma, this isn't a prank. Someone is targeting you. Bring me everything, and I'll help you trace it." The three of us, Megan, Ethan, and I, spent hours analyzing the data. What we found left me feeling sick. The device was connected to a private network tied to Ryan's firm. It wasn't just tracking me. It was part of a larger system used to monitor high-profile individuals across the city. The data was being used to manipulate property deals. Megan showed me the patterns. Influential property owners were coerced into selling their assets at ridiculously low prices. The firm would then flip those properties for tens of millions of dollars in profit. Ethan was the first to ask the question I was too afraid to voice. Mom, do you think Dad knows about this? I wanted to dismiss it, to defend Ryan. But the deeper we dug, the harder it became to ignore the truth. There were links between the network and Ryan's work email. He had signed off on the installation of surveillance devices in properties he managed. My husband wasn't just aware of this scheme. He was part of it. I couldn't bring myself to confront him immediately. I needed to know more. Megan suggested we look for similar devices in our house. We started in Ryan's home office, where Ethan found 2 more transmitters, one in his desk drawer and another in the light fixture. Each device confirmed what I was dreading. Ryan had been monitoring not just me, but our entire family. That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind spinning. Ryan slept beside me, his face calm, as if he weren't hiding a dark secret. I felt like a stranger in my own home. How long had he been doing this?
Why?
And, most importantly, what was he planning to do with all this information? The next morning, Ryan left for work as usual, kissing me on the cheek and saying, "Love you," like he always did. I forced a smile, my stomach in knots. Once he was gone, I turned to Ethan.
We're not letting this slide, I said.
But we need to be careful. If your dad is involved in something illegal, there's no telling how far he'll go to protect it. Ethan nodded, his eyes full of determination. Then let's take him down. It was the first time I realized how much Ethan had grown. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was my ally. And, together, we were going to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. After Ethan and I decided to uncover the truth, there was no turning back. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This was my husband, the man I'd shared my life with, spying on me, on our family. What made it worse was the nagging question. Why? Was it about money, power, or something even darker? The first step was to gather more proof. Megan helped us dig into Ryan's work files, starting with his emails. Ethan was surprisingly adept at bypassing the security measures on Ryan's devices. Dad's passwords are too simple, he muttered one evening, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Seriously, success 2022? Who even uses that? We found emails, dozens of them, between Ryan and someone named Lila Dawson. At first, they seemed like routine exchanges about work projects, but Megan spotted the red flags. Look at the timestamps, she pointed out. These aren't just work emails. They're coded messages. He's coordinating something. Ethan leaned closer. And this Lila person, she's involved. Look at this attachment. It was a spreadsheet listing properties Ryan's firm had recently acquired, all with purchase prices far below their market value. Beside each one was a projected profit. The total was staggering, $40 million. My heart sank. This wasn't just a side hustle. This was a full-blown scheme. But the real blow came when we found a folder labeled custody case. My blood ran cold as I opened it. Inside were fabricated reports claiming I was emotionally unstable, along with audio files that had been edited to make me sound unfit as a mother. There were even surveillance photos of Ethan and me, taken without our knowledge. I sat back, shaking. He's planning to take Ethan away from me? Ethan, sitting beside me, clenched his fists. No way. He doesn't get to do this. Megan put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. This is serious, Emma. If Ryan's willing to go this far, he's not just protecting his scheme. He's eliminating threats, starting with you. We needed more help. That's when I thought of Jack Thornton, a retired detective I'd worked with on a story years ago. Jack had a reputation for being tough but fair, and he knew how to operate in the gray areas of the law. I called him that night, explaining everything. Emma, this sounds bad, he said, his gravelly voice steady. If he's involved in something this big, you can't confront him directly. We need to gather solid evidence and hit him where it hurts. Jack agreed to meet us at his office the next day. It was a dingy little place above a diner, with mismatched furniture and a faint smell of old coffee. But Jack's expertise was undeniable. He went through everything we'd uncovered, piecing together the puzzle like the seasoned investigator he was. This Lila Dawson, he said, tapping her name on the printout. She's a weak link. People like her don't stay quiet forever. If we can find her, she might be willing to talk. It didn't take long to track her down. Lila worked late hours at the firm, often alone in her office. I decided to approach her myself, against Jack's advice. "You're too close to this," he warned. "Let me handle it." But I couldn't sit back anymore. I waited outside her office one evening, my heart pounding. When she finally stepped out, I intercepted her in the hallway. "Lila," I said, keeping my voice low. "We need to talk. It's about Ryan." Her face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, glancing around nervously. "Yes, you do," I pressed. "I know about the properties, the surveillance, the blackmail. I know everything." Lila froze, her eyes wide. I can't," she whispered. "They'll come after me. After my family."
Who?
I asked, stepping closer. "Ryan? The firm? Tell me what you're afraid of." For a moment, she hesitated. Then she broke. "It's not just Ryan," she said, her voice trembling. "It's the whole organization. They control everything. If I talk, they'll kill my brother." My heart ached for her. "Lila, I can help you. I have a retired detective and a cybersecurity expert on my side. We can protect you and your brother. But you have to trust me." She stared at me, tears in her eyes, before nodding slowly. "Okay, I'll tell you what I know." What she revealed was worse than I imagined. The surveillance devices weren't just used to track people, they were part of a larger scheme to control them. The firm targeted wealthy property owners, collected dirt on them, and forced them to sell. The profits were funneled into shell companies, some of which were linked to Ryan's personal accounts. But that wasn't all. Lila showed me a calendar entry for an upcoming meeting at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was a meeting between Ryan and the organization's leaders. "They're finalizing the next phase," she said. "If you want to stop this, that's where you need to be." I left the office feeling a mix of dread and determination. Ryan wasn't just complicit in this scheme, he was a key player. And now, thanks to Lila, we had a chance to bring it all crashing down. When I got home, Ethan was waiting for me, his laptop open on the kitchen table. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but urgent, "I hacked into Dad's network."
There's more.
"This isn't just about money. They're laundering it through fake charities, even Ethan's college fund." I felt my knees go weak. "He used your college fund?" Ethan nodded. "We have to stop him." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "We will. But we have to be smart. This is bigger than Ryan. It's about the whole organization. And we're going to take them down." By the time we reached the third night after discovering the surveillance device, I was running on sheer adrenaline. My once peaceful life was now a maze of secrets, betrayals, and plans for a fight I never thought I'd have to face. With Lila's information, the scope of Ryan's betrayal felt even bigger than before. He wasn't just lying to me, he was using our family as pawns in a larger, far darker game. I sat at the dining table with Ethan and Megan, planning our next steps. Jack joined us, spreading out a map of Austin with several locations circled in red. One of those was the warehouse where the upcoming meeting was set to take place. "This is our chance to catch him," Jack said, tapping the map. "If we can record this meeting, we'll have enough evidence to take to the FBI. But we need to be careful. These people aren't just white-collar criminals, they're dangerous." Ethan leaned forward, his expression determined. "I've been digging into the network," he said. "I found encrypted files that I think are the organization's records. If I can crack them, it'll prove everything." "Can you do it remotely?" Megan asked. Ethan nodded. "I'll need time, but I can do it. And if I sync with the warehouse's Wi-Fi during the meeting, I might be able to intercept live data." Jack raised an eyebrow. "That's risky, kid. You sure you can pull it off?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I have to." I looked at my son, amazed by his courage. "We're not putting you in harm's way," I said firmly. "You'll stay here with Megan, Jack, and I will handle the warehouse." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "No discussion, Ethan. You're helping us enough by cracking those files." His jaw tightened, but he nodded reluctantly. The night of the meeting, my nerves were on edge. I parked a block away from the warehouse, the dark streets of Austin eerily quiet. Jack sat beside me, checking the small camera we'd hidden inside a nondescript backpack. "This will give us a live feed," he said. "As long as we stay out of sight, they'll never know we're here." I nodded, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "Let's do this." We slipped into the shadows and approached the warehouse. The building was massive, its exterior lit by a single flickering light. Jack led the way, keeping low as we reached a side window. Inside, I could see Ryan pacing alongside 3 men I didn't recognize. They all exuded an air of power and authority. I pressed the earpiece in my ear and whispered, "Ethan, are you getting the feed?" "Got it," he replied. "And I'm syncing with the warehouse's network now. Give me a few minutes." I took a deep breath and focused on the scene inside. Ryan was speaking, his voice sharp and confident. "The next properties are lined up. Once the transactions are complete, we'll funnel the funds through the charity accounts." One of the men nodded. "Good. We've kept a low profile so far, but this needs to go smoothly. No more mistakes." Ryan stiffened slightly. "There won't be any mistakes." The tension in his voice made my stomach twist. This was my husband, the man I'd trusted for years, casually discussing a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. I felt both anger and heartbreak, but I couldn't let either overwhelm me. I had to stay focused. Jack whispered, "They're moving toward the desk." "Something's happening." Inside, Ryan pulled out a stack of documents and handed them to the men. "These are the revised agreements. Once we have signatures, we're locked in." "Ethan," I murmured, "can you get a copy of those?" "Working on it," he said. "I'm almost in." Suddenly, one of the men looked toward the window. Jack and I ducked out of sight, my heart racing. "They didn't see us," Jack muttered. "But we need to stay sharp." Ethan's voice came through the earpiece. "I'm in. I've got the files, and I'm intercepting their data stream." "Good work," Megan added. "Now get out of there." Before we could move, the sound of a door slamming made us freeze. I peeked through the window and saw Ryan answering his phone. His expression darkened. "What do you mean there's a breach?" he snapped. Jack and I exchanged panicked glances. "They've detected me," Ethan said, his voice tense. "I'm locking them out, but I need a few more seconds." "Finish it fast," I whispered. "We're running out of time." Ryan hung up the phone and turned to the men. "We have a problem," he said. "Someone's accessing the network." One of the men pulled out a gun. "If this is a setup, Carter, you're done." My blood ran cold. The situation was spiraling out of control, and I had no idea how we were going to get out of it. I've always thought of myself as calm under pressure. Years as a journalist had taught me how to stay composed, even in the face of chaos. But standing outside that warehouse, hearing Ryan and his accomplices talk about a breach and watching one of them pull a gun, that kind of fear was different. It clawed at my chest, threatening to paralyze me. Jack motioned for us to move back, his eyes sharp. "We can't stay here. They're on edge. If they spot us, we're done." I nodded, but my feet felt heavy. Ryan was in there, tangled in something far worse than I'd ever imagined. A part of me still hoped he might snap out of it, admit his mistakes, and try to fix them. But seeing how far he'd gone, the lies, the surveillance, the fake custody case, it was clear that wasn't going to happen. Through the earpiece, Ethan's voice broke the silence. "Mom, I've locked them out of the system, but they're scrambling to regain control. I'm downloading the rest of the files now." "Good," I whispered. "Stay focused. We're almost there." Inside the warehouse, Ryan was pacing, his frustration boiling over. "We need to secure the data. If someone's in the network, they could take everything." One of the men slammed a fist on the table. "You better fix this, Carter. We're not risking our operation because of your mistakes." I said I'll handle it. Ryan snapped, his voice shaking. Jack nudged me. "We've got enough. Let's get out of here." But before we could retreat, the door to the warehouse burst open. FBI agents flooded the room, their weapons drawn. "Federal agents. Hands in the air," one of them shouted. My breath caught in my throat. Jack grinned. "That's my guy," he muttered, clearly relieved. Through the chaos, I saw Ryan freeze. For a brief moment, our eyes met through the window. His expression wasn't one of anger or guilt, it was fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. "Emma," Ethan's voice came through again, this time panicked. "Something's wrong. They're trying to track me down. I think Dad gave them access to my IP address."
What?
My heart dropped. "Ethan, disconnect."
Now.
"I'm trying," he said, his voice shaking. "But they're fast." Inside the warehouse, one of the men lunged for a laptop on the desk. An FBI agent tackled him, but not before he managed to send a final command. Jack's phone buzzed, and he frowned at the screen. "They've locked onto Ethan's location. We need to get to him," I said, fear clawing in my chest. Jack didn't hesitate. "Let's move." We raced back to my house, my mind spinning. If Ryan's people knew where Ethan was, they wouldn't hesitate to come after him. He was the key to everything, the files, the data, the proof that could dismantle their entire operation. When we burst through the door, Megan and Ethan were huddled over his laptop. "Mom," Ethan called, relief flashing across his face. I managed to disconnect, but it was close. "Too close," Jack muttered, checking the locks on the doors. "We need to secure this place." Before we could react, my phone buzzed. A text message appeared on the screen, sent from an unknown number. "You thought you could outsmart us. Think again." I showed it to Jack. "They're not giving up." Megan frowned. "They're bluffing. We have the files. They can't undo what's already been sent." Ethan's eyes widened.
Wait.
What if they're not bluffing? What if they have something bigger planned? His words hit like a lightning bolt. This wasn't just about covering their tracks. They were desperate. And desperate people were dangerous. As if on cue, the power in the house went out, plunging us into darkness. My heart pounded as Jack pulled out a flashlight. "They've cut the power. Stay close." Ethan grabbed his laptop. "I still have battery. I can finish decrypting the files." Megan nodded. "Do it. We'll keep you safe." The next few minutes were a blur. Jack stood guard at the front door, his hand hovering near his concealed weapon. Megan and I barricaded the windows, working quickly in the dim light. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Finally, he let out a triumphant shout. "Got it. The files are decrypted. I'm sending everything to the FBI."
"Good," Jack said.
"Now let's get out of here." Before we could move, headlights flooded the driveway. A sleek black car pulled up, and Ryan stepped out. He was alone, his hands raised as if in surrender. "Emma," he called. "Let me explain." Jack moved to block the door, but I stopped him. "Let me handle this," I said, stepping outside. Ryan looked disheveled, his confident demeanor shattered. "Emma, I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice pleading.
"They forced me."
"I didn't have a choice." "You always had a choice," I said coldly. "You chose greed. You chose lies. And you chose to betray your own family." "Emma, please." "No," I snapped. "It's over, Ryan. The FBI has everything. They're shutting down the operation as we speak." His face twisted in desperation. "You don't understand. They'll come after me. They'll come after you. We need to work together." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "We're not a team anymore. You destroyed that." The sound of sirens in the distance broke the tense silence. Ryan's shoulders slumped as he realized the fight was over. "Emma, I'm sorry." But it was too late for apologies. The FBI arrived moments later, taking Ryan into custody. As they led him away, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. The man I'd once loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was massive. The FBI dismantled the organization, arresting dozens of key players. Ethan's files became critical evidence, exposing years of fraud and corruption. Ryan, facing a mountain of charges, eventually pleaded guilty in exchange for a lighter sentence. As for me and Ethan, we rebuilt. Slowly but surely, we created a new life, one grounded in trust and resilience. I returned to journalism, writing an exposé on digital surveillance that sparked national attention. Ethan channeled his tech skills into helping others protect their privacy. Looking back, I realized that betrayal doesn't just destroy, it reveals. It strips away the lies, forcing you to see what's real. And in the end, we found something far more valuable than the life we'd lost, the strength to fight for what truly mattered. My ruthless mother-in-law and husband burned down my cafe while I was still inside the building. I was badly injured and lost consciousness. Thankfully, my staff rushed me to the hospital to save my life. When I opened my eyes in the hospital, a big surprise awaited me, something I never expected. Life was never perfect, but it was mine. My name is Sophia, and I've always been a dreamer. At 28 years old, I owned a cozy little cafe tucked in the heart of a bustling city. It wasn't just a business. It was my sanctuary, a place where I poured my heart into every cup of coffee and every smile exchanged with my customers. People often told me the cafe had a certain magic, a warmth they couldn't quite explain. I like to think that magic was just love. When I met Mark, I thought my life was finally complete. He was older than me, 35, charming, and successful in his work as a business consultant. He seemed to understand my dreams and supported me in ways I thought were genuine. We got married within a year of meeting, and I was over the moon. But looking back, I can see the signs I missed. Small things, like his subtle attempts to insert himself into decisions about the cafe, or the way he dismissed my ideas as naive. And then there was his mother, Vivian. From the start, Vivian made it clear she didn't think much of me. She was a retired lawyer, sharp as a knife and twice as cold. "Sophia," she'd say with that condescending tone of hers, "you really should let Mark help you more. Running a business is no place for someone with no formal training." I always brushed her off, thinking she was just overprotective of her son. I couldn't have imagined how far she'd go to prove her point. At first, life seemed normal enough. Mark and I shared a small apartment near the cafe, and he'd occasionally drop by to help out. Mostly, though, he spent his days working with his clients. Vivian would visit once in a while, always making subtle digs about how I was running things. "This place could be so much more," she'd say, her eyes scanning the cafe like she was already imagining her version of it. I shrugged it off. What harm could a few comments do? But things began to change. Mark started coming to the cafe more often, offering to handle paperwork or help manage the books. He insisted it would take some pressure off me, and at first I was grateful. It wasn't until much later that I realized he was laying the groundwork for what was to come. One evening, I came home late from a long day at the cafe. Mark was already there, sitting at the dining table with Vivian. Papers were spread out before them, and they stopped talking the moment I walked in. "What's all this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, just going over some ideas," Mark said quickly, shuffling the papers into a neat pile. Vivian smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Mark's been helping me think about how to secure the future of the cafe," she said. There was something in her tone, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but little moments like that began to pile up. Mark started questioning my decisions more often, suggesting better ways to handle things. Vivian dropped by more frequently, always with unsolicited advice. I began to feel like a stranger in my own business, but I kept telling myself it was all in my head. One day, I was cleaning up after closing when I noticed something strange. A folder of financial records was missing from my office. I asked Mark about it, and he casually said he'd taken it home to review. "Just trying to help," he said with that easy smile of his. I wanted to believe him, but something about it didn't sit right. The real crack came a few weeks later. I'd gone to the back office to grab a file, and that's when I heard their voices. Mark and Vivian were in the main seating area, their voices low but unmistakable. "Once we get her to sign those documents, it'll all be ours," Vivian said, her words cutting through the air like a knife. My heart stopped. "She's not going to suspect a thing," Mark replied. "Sophia's too trusting." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My husband, the man I thought I could trust with my life, was plotting against me, with his own mother. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, their voices echoing in my head. When I finally moved, I slipped out of the back door and ran, my thoughts spinning wildly. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind replayed their words over and over, trying to make sense of it all. What documents were they talking about? How long had this been going on? Most of all, why? Why would they do this to me? As I stared out the window at the empty street below, one thing became clear. I couldn't ignore this. Whatever they were planning, I had to find out and I had to stop it. After hearing Mark and Vivian's conversation, I knew I couldn't let them know I was onto them. Not yet. My first instinct was to confront Mark, to demand an explanation, but deep down I knew it wouldn't help. He was already lying to me, and if I tipped my hand too early, I might lose the chance to uncover what they were planning. The next day, I acted like nothing had happened. I smiled at Mark over breakfast, went to work at the cafe, and even endured a surprise visit from Vivian, without showing the anger simmering inside me. But while they thought I was oblivious, I was carefully paying attention to every little thing they said and did. I knew I needed proof, something solid to protect myself and my cafe. A few days later, I found my chance. Mark had left his briefcase on the dining table before heading out for a meeting. My heart pounded as I opened it, terrified that he might walk back in any second. Inside, I found a stack of papers. At first, they seemed harmless, just invoices and spreadsheets. But then I saw it, a document with my name on it. It was a legal transfer of ownership for the cafe, with my signature already scrawled at the bottom. Except it wasn't my signature, it was a forgery. My blood ran cold as I flipped through the pages. Mark and Vivian had been planning to steal the cafe right out from under me. I snapped photos of the documents with my phone, every shaky click of the camera feeling like a tiny victory. But I also felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. How could Mark do this? How could the man I loved, my husband, be so cruel? I spent the next few nights piecing things together. The missing financial records, Mark's sudden interest in managing the cafe, Vivian's constant visits, it all made sense now. They'd been building their plan for months, and I'd been blind to it. But what hurt the most wasn't the scheme itself. It was the realization that my entire marriage had been a lie. Mark had never loved me. He'd only loved the idea of taking what I'd built. One evening, I decided to confront Mark. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I sat across from him at the dinner table, holding one of the photos of the forged document. Care to explain this? I asked, my voice trembling but firm. For a moment, Mark looked stunned. Then his expression shifted, his face hardening into something cold and unfamiliar. You shouldn't have gone through my things, he said, his tone flat. Not an apology, not an explanation, just cold deflection. Don't you dare turn this around on me. I snapped, slamming the photo onto the table. You forged my signature, Mark. You and Vivian have been plotting against me for months. Do you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Mark didn't deny it. He just leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms like he was annoyed by my outburst. You're overreacting, he said. The cafe needs proper management, Sophia. You're too emotional to handle it. Too emotional? I repeated, my voice rising. That cafe is my life. I built it from nothing. And you. My words caught in my throat as tears filled my eyes. You're trying to take it away from me. You don't understand, Mark said, his voice suddenly softer. But it wasn't kindness, it was manipulation. This is for the best. You'll see. Before I could respond, Vivian walked in. Of course, she acted like she didn't know what was going on, but the smug look on her face told me everything. What's all this shouting about? She asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. You know exactly what this is about, I said, glaring at her. I found the documents, Vivian. I know what you're trying to do. Vivian didn't even flinch. Sophia, you're being dramatic. We're just trying to help you. Help me, I said, laughing bitterly. By stealing my business? By forging my name? How is that help? Her smile faded, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of anger in her eyes. You should be grateful, Sophia. Mark and I are trying to save you from yourself. That cafe could be so much more, but you're holding it back. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the apartment, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get away from them, from their lies, their manipulation, their utter lack of remorse. I ended up back at the cafe, sitting alone in the dimly lit space that had once felt like home. My heart was shattered, but I wasn't ready to give up. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to fight back. I had to. If I let them win, I'd lose not just the cafe, but a piece of myself. As I sat there in the quiet, the reality of my situation sank in. I was up against two people who had no conscience, no limits to how far they'd go to get what they wanted. But I also knew one thing for sure. They underestimated me. And that would be their biggest mistake. Sitting in the quiet of my cafe that night, I felt the full weight of what I was up against. Mark and Vivian had not just betrayed me. They were trying to destroy everything I had worked so hard to build. But I wasn't going to let them win. Not without a fight. I didn't know how I'd do it yet, but one thing was clear. I had to be smarter than them. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't face this battle alone. I needed help. So, I reached out to someone I never thought I'd need, a private investigator. His name was Dan, and though he looked like he'd stepped out of a crime novel with his gruff demeanor and wrinkled trench coat, he came highly recommended. I met Dan in the corner booth of a quiet diner, my hands gripping a folder of the evidence I'd already gathered. "I need you to help me prove what they're doing," I said, sliding the folder across the table. "They're trying to steal my cafe, and I know this is just the tip of the iceberg." Dan flipped through the photos and documents, nodding thoughtfully. "Forgery, fraud. These are serious accusations," he said. "If they've been at this for a while, I'll find out. But you need to be prepared, Sophia. This could get messy." "Messy doesn't scare me," I said, my voice firm. "Losing everything does." From that day on, Dan became my lifeline. While I focused on keeping up the appearance of normalcy at the cafe, he dug into Mark and Vivian's past. It didn't take long for him to uncover a pattern of deceit. Vivian had a history of shady legal dealings stretching back years. She had manipulated business contracts, forged documents, and even swindled money from a family trust. Mark wasn't innocent either. Dan discovered that he had been embezzling funds from his consulting clients and using me as a cover for his financial schemes. Every revelation felt like a punch to the gut. The man I had loved and trusted had been living a double life, and his mother was his accomplice. But instead of breaking me, the truth fueled my determination. I had to expose them for myself and for everyone they'd hurt. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know anything. Mark continued his charade, acting like the supportive husband while secretly working with Vivian to finalize their plan. Every time he smiled at me or casually asked about the cafe's finances, I had to bite back the urge to confront him. It was infuriating, but Dan reminded me that patience was key. "Let them think they're winning," he said. "The more confident they get, the more mistakes they'll make." And he was right. One night, I caught Mark trying to access the cafe's accounts on my laptop. He didn't notice me watching from the hallway, his face lit by the glow of the screen as he typed furiously. I didn't stop him. Instead, I quietly recorded the entire thing on my phone. It was another piece of evidence to add to the growing mountain. But things took a darker turn when Vivian's tactics escalated. She started visiting the cafe more frequently, criticizing every decision I made, and even trying to intimidate my staff. One day, she cornered me in the office, her voice low and threatening. "You're not going to win this, Sophia," she said, her eyes cold and unyielding. "Mark and I know what's best, and you're just in the way." I didn't respond. I couldn't afford to let her see the fear or anger bubbling inside me. Instead, I stared her down, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. As she walked out, I knew she was getting desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. Dan's investigation uncovered the final piece of the puzzle, evidence that Mark and Vivian had embezzled money from a charity Vivian had once chaired. It was a bombshell, proof of their greed and lack of morality. Armed with this, I filed a legal complaint. It wasn't just about protecting my cafe anymore. It was about holding them accountable for everything they had done. The day I handed the evidence to my lawyer, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. When Mark and Vivian were served with legal papers, their reactions were priceless. Mark tried to play the victim, claiming he didn't understand what was happening. Vivian, on the other hand, was livid. She stormed into the cafe, shouting accusations and threats. I calmly told her to leave, knowing that every word she said was just more proof of her desperation. As the legal battle loomed, I prepared myself for what was to come. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I wasn't alone. I had Dan, my lawyer, and a growing network of allies who believed in my fight. Most importantly, I had my own strength, something I hadn't fully realized until now. The day of the trial arrived faster than I expected, but I was ready. As I walked into the courtroom, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. This wasn't just about saving my cafe anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and proving that no one could take what I had worked so hard to build. Mark and Vivian sat across the room, their faces a mix of defiance and nervousness. Mark avoided my gaze, while Vivian glared at me as if she could still intimidate me. But I wasn't that naive woman anymore. I had spent too many sleepless nights preparing for this moment, and I was determined to see it through. The prosecution presented the evidence I had painstakingly gathered with Dan's help. The forged documents, the embezzled funds, the laptop recordings, it was all laid out in meticulous detail. Watching their lies unravel was both satisfying and heartbreaking. I listened as the prosecution described how Mark and Vivian had stolen from charities, manipulated contracts, and betrayed countless people, including me. Every word was a painful reminder of how much I had lost, but it was also proof that justice was within reach. When it was my turn to testify, I took a deep breath and told my story. I spoke about the love and trust one had given Mark, the way Vivian had undermined me at every turn, and the moment I discovered their plan to steal my cafe. I didn't hold back. I let the court see my pain, but I also let them see my strength. As I spoke, I noticed something shift in the courtroom. The jury, the judge, even the audience, seemed to feel the weight of my words. For so long, I had been made to feel powerless, but now, standing there, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my voice. The defense tried to discredit me, of course. Vivian's lawyer painted me as an emotional, inexperienced woman who couldn't handle running a business. But every attempt to undermine me only strengthened my resolve. I had the truth on my side, and the evidence was undeniable. The turning point came when the prosecution revealed the embezzlement scheme involving the charity. It was a bombshell, proof of their greed and lack of conscience. The courtroom erupted in whispers as the evidence was presented. Bank statements, falsified reports, and testimony from former associates who had been victims of their schemes. Mark and Vivian's confidence crumbled before my eyes. For the first time, they looked genuinely afraid. The trial lasted several days, but the verdict was clear. Mark and Vivian were found guilty on multiple counts, including fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. The judge handed down harsh sentences, long prison terms that would ensure they couldn't hurt anyone else for a very long time. As they were led away in handcuffs, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Justice had been served, but more than that, I felt free. Free from their lies, their manipulation, and the pain they had caused me. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy, but it was worth every struggle. The cafe, though damaged by the fire Vivian had started, became my project of healing. I worked tirelessly to restore it, pouring all my energy into making it better than ever. My community rallied around me, offering support and encouragement that reminded me why I had started this journey in the first place. When the cafe reopened, it wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of resilience and hope. Every cup of coffee I served, every smile I shared with my customers, felt like a small victory. I had faced the worst, and I had come out stronger. Looking back, I still feel the sting of betrayal, but I also feel pride. Pride that I didn't let them break me. Pride that I fought back, not just for myself, but for everyone they had wronged. And pride in the woman I've become. The woman who refused to give up. The cafe is thriving now, and so am I. Every day is a new chapter, a chance to build the legacy I've always dreamed of. I don't know what the future holds, But I know one thing for sure. I'll face it with courage, just like I've faced everything else.